The story continues, and thanks to Summer, everyone at the crime scene finally sees the criminal behind the murder. Poor Summer feels exhausted after pushing herself, but once again, because of her efforts, we get a clear look at the person responsible for these murders in this joint. They notice that the victim didn't resist at all, as if he had been asleep the whole time. This leads Renee to believe he was possibly drugged with dream water. Soraya agrees, as it's the only explanation for why Pickaxe didn't even make a sound. His throat was slit, but only enough to draw blood, because Pickaxe had already been dead long before. Suddenly, a police officer reports back, claiming to have found out the murderer's identity. The officer states that the killer's name is Manes, and that he used to be part of the patrol. This officer knows this because he had worked with that killer before. Manes lives in the inner city district, near West Street and the Sheep Pub. Nightingale is pleased with the report. Now that they know who the criminal is, they won't have to waste time searching for him. With that, Nightingale decides to raid his house. Later, they arrive at his place and find him sleeping soundly. But his sleep is quickly interrupted when the officers arrest him and tie him down. Renee breaks it down to this bastard that he's under arrest, then grabs him by the hair and slams him to the ground. Renee is absolutely furious to see this traitor who is plotting against Prince Roland's plans. He wants this bastard to hang at the city gate as a clear warning to other criminals who might harbor ill intentions. But the bastard tries to run his mouth, denying the accusations. That's when Renee punches him hard enough that teeth fly from his mouth, sending him crashing down. Renee lets him know that they've seen everything with their own eyes, so there's no room for argument. This is when Nightingale steps forward to continue the interrogation. She asks him about the mastermind who wants to kill the rats who applied for jobs, and the meaning behind those paintings on the walls, the crown marked with a cross. Not to mention, the dream water mains fed to the victims isn't cheap, and it's even harder to buy now that the rats are gone. Renee roars at the bastard to start spilling everything, or else he'll face the wrath of the elites. But the bastard stays silent, so Renee keeps punching him. Finally, Mayonnaise speaks up and owns up to all the atrocities he's committed. He claims that someone in the inner district had tasked him with the job. The mastermind offered him 4 golden royals for every person killed, and further assured him that civilians would end up hating the police for it. If they killed enough people, the common folk would start believing that the police didn't have enough power to protect them, and the patrol would make a comeback. Mayonnaise admits he doesn't know exactly why the mastermind chose him for the job. They had met at the pub, where the mastermind handed him a bottle of dream water and told him he'd strike it big if he followed the instructions. Mayonnaise claims he had no savings, and after his application to the police force was rejected, he was left jobless, filled with resentment toward the police. That's why he did something he clearly shouldn't have. Nightingale then questions the bastard, asking if he knows anything else about the mastermind. He denies it, pretending he has no idea. This gets Nightingale worked up because she's sure he's lying. That's when Renee warns the bastard that Nightingale is a witch and can easily see through lies. Mayonnaise insists that the mastermind never told him his name, so he can't confirm anything about him. However, he admits that the mastermind didn't seem like an elite. When they met 2 days ago, the man was in a rush. Then, he suddenly remembers the uniform the man was wearing. It had a symbol that looked like a flower petal. The mention of a flower petal instantly reminds Renee of the honeysuckle crest. The man claims he doesn't know the full details, which is why he was trying to avoid spreading any misinformation. After all, why would the honeysuckle family harm the prince when they are his protectors? Renee is also sure that Petrov wouldn't do something like this, so it has to be someone else. He then decides to wait for the next meeting between him and the mastermind. When that happens, they'll capture the person behind these killings. Meanwhile, Nightingale notices that Maines doesn't seem to be lying about anything. That's when Detective Lightning and Maggie arrive on the scene, informing them that the prince's meeting with the fortress officials is over, so they should be heading back. The mention of the meeting jolts Nightingale out of her thoughts as a realization sinks in. She reflects on the fact that the prince is currently meeting with the elites to discuss the new city hall. That means no one is guarding him. He's been left inside the conference room with no guards. If the killer is really the member of Honeysuckle family, he would definitely have access to approach the prince. Seeing the urgency of the situation, she quickly tells Lightning to take her to the prince immediately. And so, they speed through the sky above the streets, confident they'll arrive within 3 minutes. Nightingale feels tense with each passing minute. The murders started 3 days ago, the same time Petrov's letter arrived at Bordertown. It all feels suspicious to her, as if they had always been waiting for the perfect opportunity to catch the prince alone, with no one around. And so, as we see, Roland has been pierced by a sword. Nightingale rushes to the scene, but when she gets there, she finds a body on the ground. Tears well up in her eyes as she thinks that Roland is dead. She watches as the officers arrive and turn the body over, only to reveal that it's actually the assassin who got screwed instead. He was a guard from the Honeysuckle family. Just then, Prince Roland catches everyone's attention, and without a second thought, Nightingale throws herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. Roland then turns to the panicked crowd in order to calm them down. He instructs everyone to carry on with the lunch and stay inside the castle, as the meeting will continue in the afternoon. A while later, Nightingale fills Prince Roland in on everything. How the serial killer, Maines, was linked to this assassination attempt. She explains that they found out a guard from Honeysuckle was behind the attack, which is why they rushed over immediately. Their plan was to create a diversion, giving the assassin a perfect chance to strike the prince. She's relieved beyond words that he's safe. Roland, however, is visibly disappointed. Petrov, standing nearby, looks equally guilty, admitting that he had no idea something like this would happen. The prince reassures him and tells him to rise, stating that he doesn't like placing blame. However, he does point out that it is Petrov's fault for leaving holes in security and failing to properly vet his personnel. He then orders Petrov to investigate the assassin's identity and origins, and he wants answers as soon as possible. Once Petrov leaves, Roland explains that it was thanks to Sylvie's immediate warning that he was able to escape in time. He also admits that the assassins made a dumb mistake attempting the attack inside the conference hall. Even though no weapons were allowed, the assassin was still a guard, and he managed to hide a dagger in his clothes to bypass the pat-down. Another misstep on his part was carrying a stone of divine judgment. While it was common for guards to wear one while patrolling outside, it made him stand out too much in the room, especially since no elite was allowed to carry a stone. The slight gap in the crowd gave Sylvie just enough time to notice him immediately. With her warning, Roland drew his revolver and flicked the safety off. Though the prince was stabbed, the blade failed to pierce Soraya's special cloth, which saved his life. Wasting no time, Roland fired at nearly point-blank range. Two 12mm bullets tore through the assassin, killing him instantly. The situation was over before it could spiral out of control. But Nightingale still feels uneasy about all of this. If he hadn't managed to flick the safety off in time, or if the revolver had malfunctioned, Roland would have been doomed. Her frustration shifts to Lightning, who had left the prince alone in the first place. Poor Lightning, who only wanted to play detective, nearly bursts into tears as she apologizes over and over. She swears she'll never leave the prince unguarded again. Next time, she'll stay at her post, no matter what. But Nightingale still insists that the prince punish Lightning and Maggie for failing to carry out their assigned duty. If Lightning had been there, she could have picked him up and flown him away. However, Roland doesn't believe strict punishment is necessary. Still, Nightingale keeps pressing the issue. Eventually, the prince gives in and decides on a punishment for Lightning. She will have to complete 3 exercises in math and science after lunch. Of course, this punishment is as brutal as it gets, leaving poor Lightning completely shocked. The aftermath of the shock is so severe that her muscles stop working from sheer disbelief, forcing Sylvie to drag her away. Later, Nightingale starts feeling remorseful that she wasn't there to protect the prince herself. But Roland reassures her that she did everything perfectly. He gives her a different perspective. He points out that the only reason the assassin, Sheo, attempted to kill him in the conference hall was because there was a powerful witch protecting him. Diverting her was the only way for the killer to even have a chance. But Nightingale still doesn't like the fact that the killer almost succeeded in his assassination attempt. Roland, however, doesn't see it that way. He believes failure is failure, and the only reason the assassin failed was because of her. He thanks her for all the effort she has put in, and tells her that he truly appreciates her concern. Finally, Nightingale feels at ease. She smiles, acknowledging his words. The investigation concluded that the assassin, Sheo, was not from the Western region, and used to be one of Duke Ryan's patrol soldiers. But Petrov and Nightingale theorized that this assassination wasn't out of Duke Ryan's revenge. Sheo's residence was locked down because only Summer's replay magic could reveal the truth. He had asked Maggie to bring Miss Spear Passy to the fortress castle. Later, Maggie brought Spear Passy there. After dinner, they followed the Elk Earl to Sheo's house, which was a normal townhouse in the inner district. It had been completely cleaned out, not even a single piece of paper was left behind. The criminal had obviously prepared in advance to destroy all evidence. The prince told Summer that Sheo was usually out during the day, so she only needed to replay what happened at night. He needed to see everything that took place in this room, starting from when Sheo contacted Mayonnaise. Every moment was important. Spear Passy then began her mojo, borrowing Maggie's magic and transferring it to Summer so she could hold her magic longer. The prince was sure that with Maggie's extra magic, Summer wouldn't miss a single detail, and Soraya's real-time drawings would keep a record of everything in case they forgot. In the replay, the prince notices a piece of familiar jewelry, and told Soraya to draw it because he had seen it before. It might be something special. After painting it, she shows it to the prince. It turns out to be a jewel, engraved with the Star Tower and spears, which is the crest of the royal court. This leads Nightingale to believe that perhaps Sheo was sent by Timothy. But Prince Roland believes this jewel actually belonged to the king, Wimbledon, his father. Nightingale reminds him that Wimbledon was supposed to have been killed by the first prince, Gerald. However, the prince claims that he has seen this before in his father's office. When he asked about it, his father explained that every jewel represents a brave warrior loyal to the castle. The more jewels there were, the more stable the Wimbledon throne was. This means Sheo was probably a sleeper agent appointed to Duke Ryan's side, monitoring the entire western region. Renee then questions why Sheo would try to kill him. In response, the prince theorizes that Timothy likely found the list of rings. Once he had a ring that represented Sheo, Sheo had no choice but to carry out Timothy's order, even if it was meant to assassinate Prince Roland. The crest means everything to them, and they would do anything for it. In the end, Sheo throws the crest away and destroys it, because in his eyes, if there is no crest, then there will not be any orders either. Later that night, Nightingale sneaks out of her room and quietly lays beside the prince. She feels guilty coming here, especially since Anna has a relationship with him, but she can't resist anymore. The next day arrives, and Prince Roland wakes up, totally tired. He notices that breakfast is already there, and it seems Nightingale was the one who brought it. Seeing how Nightingale is in an unusually good mood, he asks her out of curiosity, wondering if she had a sweet dream. Well, what she did last night was nothing short of a dream, so she confirms his guess. He then reminds her that she will be accompanying him today. He argues that if Timothy really used the list of rings, there may be sleeper agents elsewhere in the Western region, and he can't interrogate everyone himself. Not to mention, some of these sleeper agents should not be wasted on Timothy's orders, as they have higher potential than that. Nightingale is ready to follow him wherever he wants to go. That's when he shares with her that they're heading to the mines and the salt wells, and it's one of the main reasons he came here. Later, they arrive at the mines, where they meet a man named Denver, who acts as their guide. He reveals that many generations have worked around these mines, and the hunters who first discovered them were his ancestors. The Kelly family has served 3 dukes, and their maps are as tall as a person, and no one knows the mines better than they do. The prince then inquires about why no one is working now. Denver explains that it's because of the months of demons. Since they only recently ended, the snow around the mountains has melted into the tunnels, flooding the deeper sections. Though the mines have drains and wells in place, they fill up too quickly for them to siphon the water away, so operations are temporarily shut down. According to precedent, they can only start working again in the summer. The prince is confident that a few steam engines would be enough to siphon the water. Since Denver doesn't seem to know about steam engines, the prince elaborates, explaining that a steam engine is a machine that can keep the mines running all year round. With that settled, the prince decides to proceed further. But before they go deeper inside, Denver stops the prince and presents him with a gift on behalf of the Kelly family. The box contains an exquisite rainbow stone, selected from the purest crystals. Its history stretches back centuries. When the prince opens the box, the brilliance of the object inside shines brightly, leaving him in awe. Then, suddenly, it dawns on him that this crystal seems familiar, something he had seen in his previous world. He remembers that this crystal was called diaspore. When diaspore reaches the quality of a jewel, it becomes incredibly shiny under extreme heat. Its mix of red and green is striking, which explains why people likened it to a rainbow. When diaspore loses its moisture, it transforms into corundum, which can then turn into valuable gems like rubies and sapphires. The prince then questions Denver about the remnants surrounding the stone when they dug it up. He wants to know what they did with the rocks, mud, and everything else they extracted along with it. Denver reveals that they simply piled them up at the foot of the mountain after sorting them out, discarding anything too impure or cracked to be made into jewels. But the prince confidently tells him that this is where they've been mistaken. If he's being honest, what they threw away is actually the real treasure. You see, diaspore is mostly made of aluminum oxide, and since it's a byproduct of bauxite, that means this place is rich in aluminum. The discarded rocks and mud are actually the raw materials for smelting, and aluminum is infinitely useful. Compared to iron, aluminum's low density and anti-corrosive properties make it a vital material in industry and transportation technology. Aluminum is also promising as a weapon material in this world, particularly for large airships. While the prince originally planned to prioritize other iron mines, this tunnel has been an unexpected surprise. So, he decides to adjust his plans and explore this one first. The scene then transitions to Slumber Island, where the ship carrying Princess Tilly and the other witches has finally arrived at the dock. To welcome her, the witches of Slumber Island excitedly rush toward her, jumping into her arms in order to exchange warm hugs, as they had missed her dearly. As Tilly shares warm hugs with her sisters, she has a profound realization. No matter what happens, this will always be her true home. A territory created by witches for witches. Then, a green-haired witch, Camellia, steps forward to greet her. Princess Tilly is glad to see her as well and thanks her for managing the territory in her absence. Camellia assures her that everything has gone smoothly. She believes constructing the slumber spell was definitely a great idea. While she plans to report the details later, for now, she insists that Tilly get some rest. As the witches begin unloading all the souvenirs Tilly brought from Border Town, they also find a stash of books among the cargo. The witches aren't exactly thrilled to see these thick books, especially since they had been expecting gifts like soap, perfume, or something more exciting. Camellia then turns to Princess Tilly and questions if she intends to teach everyone from these books. To which Princess Tilly responds positively. After all, gathering knowledge and broadening one's horizons is the only way to grow stronger. That's when Thunder speaks up, pointing out that widespread education isn't a simple task. It requires a lot of money and time, and when people put down their tools to study, a portion of the labor force is temporarily lost. Unlike business, the results aren't immediate. It requires patience and consistency. But Tilly firmly believes that education can bring incredible change, even for commoners. The two then exchange greetings since they haven't seen each other in a long time. Thunder takes the opportunity to ask about her trip to the Western region, curious if she found the answers she was looking for. Princess Tilly admits that she still hasn't gotten the answers she sought as the prince remains very secretive and omits information very carefully, but she was amazed to see how the western region is flourishing under his rule. Meanwhile, the witches discover the stuffed toy Roland had gifted to his sister, and they all swoon over how soft it is. Wanting to avoid being bombarded with endless questions from the other witches, Tilly decides she'd rather hear Camelia's report first. In the office, Thunder also gets the chance to read all the valuable information Tilly managed to gather. It contains everything, from the existence of devils to the revelation that the ruins were actually created by witches. Not only that, but Bordertown also discovered an ancient witch who has been alive for 400 years. The sheer amount of information is overwhelming, and Thunder is forced to admit that Tilly has learned more on this trip than he has in his entire life. Tilly then asks for Thunder's thoughts on the devils, wondering if he finds anything particularly frightening. He admits that he does feel a little spooked, but compared to his burning passion for exploration, that fear is nothing. Being an adventurer and explorer through and through, he's now itching to see that so-called living fossil from 400 years ago. Tilly finds it ironic that this guy wants to visit Bordertown not to reunite with his daughter, but to meet Agatha instead. Thunder then proceeds to share his latest exploits from his recent expedition east of the sea line. There, he witnessed a cliff formed entirely by seawater, where ships could somehow sail on vertical water. What's even more incredible is that he managed to climb the cliff and watch the entire process of the tide in action. As the current sped up, the ship started plummeting toward the lowest point of the cliff. If Molly hadn't protected it, the impact alone would have snapped the ship in half. He kept turning the wheel, trying to steer toward the rushing water. Coincidentally, a strong wind was pushing against it, creating a fascinating balance between the two forces. The ship couldn't move forward another step, yet it wasn't being pushed down the cliff either. But based on his observations, even if the ship had been pushed off, it would have been just like climbing up, but in reverse. It would have simply landed at the lower part of the cliff. The whirlpool eventually filled up, and from the top of the sea line, they were able to witness the entire phenomenon unfold. The height of the sea line shrank while the sea level rose, and that, Thunder reveals, is the truth behind the tides. The sight was extraordinary. From a distance, it looked as if they were stuck on the side of a cliff, with their sails perfectly parallel to the sea's surface, like they could fall at any moment. Tilly struggles to make sense of it, but Thunder insists he saw everything with his own eyes. Half a month later, the tide began to recede at the same time as Phantom Island did. He asks if she remembers that place where the sea level drops rapidly, as if there's a massive hole at the bottom swallowing all the water. Tilly, however, dismisses it as just a theory. No one really knows what the seafloor looks like. But Thunder pushes forward, asking her why she thinks this part of the ocean is called the Whirlpool Seas. He reminds her that she mentioned how the continent was ruled by witches 400 years ago, so maybe the name itself comes from an even earlier time period. Tilly has to admit that he's making some solid points, but she argues that they don't have the means to explore the bottom of the ocean. No one on Slumber Island can do something like that, and proving such a theory would be incredibly difficult. But Thunder claims he knows someone. There's a witch who lives in the bay, one who hasn't interacted with humans in a long time. She was once a good friend of his, helping him during his expeditions. But ever since her abilities awakened, she bid farewell to the land. Sometimes, you can hear her song drifting through the fog out at sea. This jogs a memory for Tilly. She wants Thunder to confirm it if he's referring to the rumors about a mermaid who guides ships through the ocean. Thunder confirms this. He further admits he's not sure if she'll be willing to help, but they have to try. He might also need the assistance of his old friend, Margaret. For this expedition, he wants to hear more about the new ships in Bordertown. He's heard they don't require wind to sail, which would be incredibly useful for his expeditions. Money isn't an issue, and the sooner he gets his hands on one, the better. So he asks Tilly if she can send a letter of purchase to Prince Roland on his behalf. He also makes one more request. He doesn't want his daughter finding out about his adventures. Tilly understands his reasoning and assures him she won't say a word. The scene transitions to Longsong Fortress, where a newly revolutionized ship designed by the prince is docked. Thousands of people are lined up, eager for a chance to board and sail to Bordertown. Some hesitate, uncertain about moving to such an unfamiliar place. But many see it as an opportunity of better jobs, higher wages, and the chance to earn more silver. And who wouldn't want extra money? Some dream of making enough to buy themselves a bicycle. Meanwhile, Prince Roland is busy guiding Petrov before his departure for Bordertown. He goes over the assignments Petrov needs to handle and, after ensuring all responsibilities are properly handed over, he finally boards the ship. With only a week left until the spring assault, Roland feels relieved knowing Iron Axe is taking care of the military preparations in advance. Their main focus right now should be on crop production. If they plant their spring seeds diligently, they will have enough food stockpiled to feel secure. Nightingale also expresses her confidence in their agriculture efforts. With both their agricultural director and Leaf's Gold 1 ability, she believes they are set for a successful harvest. Roland, however, reminds her that their spring assault has another surprise in store, one that will be revealed soon enough. Once they return to Bordertown, we find Anna working on the construction of a new ship. She is pleased to see Roland back and, naturally, he asks about the progress of the project. Anna describes the numerous challenges they faced during construction, but confidently states that she has resolved all of them. This leaves Roland genuinely surprised. The issues she mentioned were far too complex for the average person to solve, yet she handled them effortlessly. She then asks him if he has a name in mind for the ship, but Roland admits he hasn't thought of one yet. The reason Anna asks about the ship's name is that First Army soldiers have been coming by every few days to admire the vessel. Some of them even argued about engraving their names onto the hull, claiming that Roland had promised to name a warship after the best artillery soldier. However, Roland dismisses the idea, stating that this particular ship will not be named after an individual. The first warship's name will not only symbolize itself, but also represent its entire class. He refuses to grant such a significant honor to a single person. With that settled, they decide to simply call it Roland, officially naming it Roland 1 Warship. The scene then shifts to the capital, where a group of men, including this guy in a red coat, and he is always staying in the capital in order to keep an eye over any move Timothy makes, and report it to the prince as soon as possible. Everyone refers to him as Tassa. The discussion revolves around Timothy's latest move. It seems Timothy has begun his offensive, sending a fleet of 500 men to blockade the Redwater River, aiming to cut off border towns' trade routes. The fleet consists of 4 battleships and 200 fully equipped soldiers, reinforcing the blockade. Tassa is determined to report this development to Prince Roland as soon as possible. However, before doing so, he takes a moment to read a message he has just received from the prince. After reading it, he reassures his fellow members that they no longer need to worry. Prince Roland, along with the First Army, has already set sail, and their target is none other than the capital itself. The scene transitions back to Prince Roland. Nightingale appears, immediately noticing how unusually happy he seems. She assumes that his good mood must come from the fact that he will finally see his home after such a long time. But Roland denies it, stating that the Western region is his only true home. He insists that his happiness comes from knowing that he will soon be able to end this conflict with Timothy once and for all. Of course, Nightingale, with her ability to detect lies, knows better. A faint blush creeps onto her face as she calls him out for lying. Exposed, Roland finally admits the real reason for his happiness. He is simply satisfied with the fact that he managed to establish so many warships in just 1 month. Nightingale then shifts the conversation. She sincerely thanks him. She is grateful that he is bringing an end to the conflict and stabilizing Greycastle. Under his rule, both mortals and witches will finally be able to live in peace. She had always believed in him, but she never expected this day to come so soon. However, Roland reminds her that victory will not come instantly. Even if he defeats Timothy, there will still be remnants of the elite who resist or struggle against his rule. Fully unifying Greycastle may take years. Hearing this, she quietly worries that she might not live long enough to see that future. But before she can dwell on the thought any longer, Roland swiftly flicks her forehead. No talk of dying is allowed here because he would never let her go so easily. Nightingale argues that as a battle witch, she is always on the front lines. The possibility of dying early is something she has already accepted. Proudly, she reaffirms her commitment, stating that she has already pledged her loyalty to Roland, and would willingly sacrifice herself for him if necessary. But Roland immediately dismisses such thoughts. He assures her that the only ones who will be making sacrifices will be their enemies. Just then, Lightning arrives in order to report urgent news. She reveals that 4 sailboats are approaching from 20 kilometers away. With oars on both sides, it is highly likely that they are the eagle-headed boats mentioned in the letter. Roland gives her an approving pat for her surveillance skills. He also corrects her that the word eagle likely refers to a battering ram hidden below the waterline. Feeling proud of herself, Lightning cheekily demands a reward for her efforts. She wants one of her school assignments to be excused. After some back and forth, Roland reluctantly agrees, but with one condition: she must not slack off like last time. As Lightning beams with joy, Nightingale thinks that he should not have given in so easily. But Roland simply smiles. To him, small acts of mercy are what make people remember kindness. With that settled, he turns serious once more. There is work to be done. According to Tassa's reports, Timothy has sent 4 galleys. Their speed is roughly the same as Roland's concrete ships, but they have the advantage of agility. These ships are designed for ramming and boarding enemy ships, and they could also potentially be used for suicide attacks. Given that the enemy is trying to blockade their waterways, Roland dismisses the second possibility of a suicide attack. He firmly believes that this will be everyone's first naval battle, so he's open to any strategic suggestions from his commanders. One of the officers in the conference speaks up, pointing out that cannons are not very accurate against moving targets. Since both sides will be in constant motion, he recommends opening fire only when they are within 50 meters. He assures that his platoon can sink an enemy ship with each cannonball at that range. Another platoon leader counters this, explaining that cannon fire consumes a lot of ammunition, and only Miss Anna can manufacture it. He suggests waiting for the enemy to make the first move, and when they attempt to board, they can retaliate with heavy machine guns. Prince Roland, carefully weighing both opinions, turns to the captain for his perspective. The captain's response surprises everyone. He proposes a direct collision strategy. The other commanders are taken aback, but the captain elaborates. Our ships are large, fast, and made of steel. A wooden enemy ship would likely collapse from a simple collision or lose its mobility due to heavy damage. It looks like Roland is absolutely loving the idea, and he eventually locks on it. He commands them to sound the horns, ready to implement the daring plan. On the enemy side, Duke Eden and his crew begin to notice a strange black smoke rising on the horizon. At first, they assume it's a fire somewhere along the river, perhaps a merchant ship caught in flames. These idiots just can't make sense of it, especially since they don't understand the concept of engines or the source of such smoke. As they continue to observe, they notice the ships traveling far too quickly for merchant vessels. There are no flags to identify them, which adds to the mystery. The speed at which they're moving along the river, effortlessly defying expectations, only deepens their confusion. Soon enough, the ship Roland 1 comes into full view. The enemy soldiers and commanders are left utterly stunned, their minds struggling to comprehend the massive, imposing steel vessel barreling toward them. It's unlike anything they've seen before. A ship of that size, that fast, and made of steel is a monstrosity in their eyes. The massive chunk of steel collides directly with the wooden ships in the blockade, and the results are catastrophic. The wooden boats, unable to withstand the sheer force of the collision, begin to sink rapidly. Duke Eden panics as he frantically orders the ship's captain to head for the shore. While running away, he dreads his fate and the severe consequences that will follow if he turns tail and flees. If he enters the capital like this, he'll have no chance of getting promoted. His only opportunity is to seize the traitor's warship and bring it to King Timothy. Even if it was created by devils, as long as it's manned by humans, he's convinced they still have a chance to win. So, he yells at his men to bring out the bows and torches. They're going to kill that bastard hiding in that metal shell. Whoever helps take down Roland and his ship, Eden promises them a gold royal. The offer is just as lucrative as it can get, so they charge full speed at our hero's warship once again. The bastards are armed with their long-range weapons, feeling smug, thinking victory is theirs. They start firing arrows and throwing bombs with everything they've got. But sadly for these primitive suckers, their arrows are utterly useless against the thick steel of the ship. Iron Axe quickly fires the machine gun mounted on the warship, and those bullets literally tear through the shields those bastards are holding. The barrage of bullets starts disintegrating the wooden boat structure, ripping through it like paper. As the relentless rain of bullets continues, all Eden can do is stand there, completely frozen. By all common sense, a massive weapon like the one our party has should have horrible reload speed and accuracy. So Eden has no idea how in the hell Prince Roland managed to create such a terrifying weapon. The only explanation he can think of is that this must be an invention of the devils. In the end, he gets drilled by a bullet too and sinks down along with his ship. The boys on the warship feel disappointed that the enemy got obliterated so easily. They were looking forward to flexing their muscles and showing what the artillery squad is made of. But their commander quickly reminds these idiots that they can't afford to waste ammo, especially considering how much effort Anna puts into making them. He assures them that everyone will get their time to shine, so they shouldn't feel too salty about it. The boys then start discussing among themselves how amazing it would be if they had a warship named after them. 2 days pass since that successful subjugation, and it looks like their warship is finally nearing the capital. But Lightning reports that the port appears to be heavily guarded by at least 100 men, and they look like civilian soldiers. Prince Roland is surprised to hear that only 100 men have been deployed at the port. You see, he had predicted that the first battle would happen near the port. To prevent his army from disembarking, soldiers with crossbows and hand cannons might be surrounding them at the riverbank. They could even have catapults ready. But now, Roland is starting to believe that the enemy has abandoned their huge advantage of the shoreline. He does admit that it was a wise move, but he also acknowledges that Timothy doesn't seem to understand the range and power of 150-55mm shells. He then asks Sylvie if any of the civilian soldiers are equipped with berserker pills, to which Sylvie replies that she didn't find anything like that, and they aren't even fully equipped with weapons. However, she notices something strange beneath the dirt. Apparently, the enemy has buried something down there. She can see canisters and barrels hidden under the port, filled with a black and gray powder. It doesn't take long for Roland to realize that it must be gunpowder. Now everything makes sense. The civilian army of 100 is simply disposable. Timothy wants Roland's soldiers to disembark and attack the port. And once the explosives are detonated, everyone, including Timothy's own men, will be blown to pieces. Since Timothy isn't capable of remote detonation, those poor soldiers are there to do it manually. Roland immediately instructs Sylvie to locate the fuses and the soldiers manning them. As for Nightingale, Roland gives her the task of sneaking in, taking out the fuse operators, and watching the gate to prevent anyone else from detonating the gunpowder. Later, he plans to destroy the fuses using their cannons. Now let's switch to the enemy's perspective. The captain of the soldiers, Duke Thames, is quite fascinated by the fact that that idiot Roland actually decided to attack the capital. You see, the royal city has never been attacked in its 200-year history. No one has ever had the courage to challenge its mighty bluestone walls. So, to him, it's ridiculous that Roland would choose to attack despite being at such a disadvantage. With the enemy almost at the port, he addresses his soldiers. He orders them to relay his commands. He wants the 1st and 2nd Cavalry squads on standby behind the gate, with mercenaries stationed alongside them. The bastard is feeling pretty smug about their plan. They're convinced that Roland's forces won't stand a chance against the surprise they have in store, gunpowder buried beneath the ground, ready to be detonated. But then, as he observes the battlefield, he suddenly notices something odd. Roland's warship is leaving the fleet. Now that he thinks about it, he realizes something strange. Roland's warship doesn't have oars, which makes him wonder how the hell is that ship even sailing. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. No matter how strange their ships are, the Duke is sure that his enemies are going to die, though for some reason, they aren't docking at the port. For a moment, these overconfident bastards think that maybe, just maybe, the tiny civilian army managed to scare the shit out of Roland, and he's running for his life. And that's when our warship fires its first 150-55mm shell, obliterating everything where it lands. Those idiots have no clue what the hell just happened. Duke Thames assumes for a moment that the gunpowder they buried must have detonated by accident. But then, a soldier frantically reports that the attack came from the warship. Of course, the Duke gets annoyed. What the soldier is saying is completely bullshit. How the hell could a warship nearly a mile away launch an explosion like this? Before he can even process it, more devastating news arrives. The fuse locations have been destroyed. The bastard starts trembling. This means Timothy's ambush plan has completely tanked. At this point, he's certain that the enemy is going to reach the city walls. And then, another explosion erupts as the gunpowder buried beneath the ground ignites, wiping out all the soldiers standing nearby. They literally have no idea who is detonating the damn thing. And just when they think things couldn't get any worse, another bad report comes in. The main capital gate is in danger. The Duke is completely lost. How is this even possible when the enemy is still miles away? But we can clearly see that it's Roland's artillery who obliterated the gate. The soldiers stationed there are all smoked. At this point, the only thing running through their minds is that the enemy is downright diabolical. Panicking, the Duke quickly orders his soldiers to control the cavalry and not let them scatter. But before they can even react, something appears in the sky. A hot air balloon. Wendy doesn't waste a second before deploying one of the bombs. Lightning ensures the bomb lands in the perfect spot, and in an instant, it crashes down right over the main gate. The wall crumbles, burying the soldiers beneath it. In a matter of minutes, Roland's strategic prowess has completely wiped out the enemy's defenses, without even stepping foot on the port. Sylvie is somewhat horrified by all the destruction, and the enemy is now completely defenseless. But Nightingale believes that these shitheads deserve every bit of it. If the roles were reversed, the enemy wouldn't have been any less ruthless. But Prince Roland believes that no matter who wins, war always comes at a price. Right now, though, he has no time to brood over the horrors of war or the virtues of pacifism. This isn't just about survival. It's a battle for power, ideals, and most importantly, a war of eras. When an inferior era is replaced, it never fades quietly. Massive bloodshed is inevitable, and if someone has to suffer, Roland would rather it be his enemies than himself. With that, he orders his soldiers to sound the horns and take the city. Iron Axe and his first army platoon are ready to comply. A while later, the entire city is in shambles. Our soldiers have infiltrated the streets, pushing deeper into enemy territory. Right now, they're facing mindless berserker-pilled soldiers. The platoon commander orders Squad 4 to retreat and instructs Squad 3 to stand by, ready to engage. Suddenly, an enemy soldier lunges forward and kills one of our men on the spot. Turns out, berserker soldiers were waiting in a nearby shack, lying in ambush. They launch a surprise attack, but as soon as our troops start firing, the tables turn fast. One of the soldiers grabs the heavy machine gun, unleashing a relentless barrage of bullets. The mindless bastards drop like flies. Once the massacre ends, the soldiers sweep the area, finishing off the last surviving berserker troops. Let's not forget the balloon, which is also wreaking havoc, dropping one bomb after another. Meanwhile, a soldier rushes into Timothy's chamber, where the so-called king sits slumped on his bed, completely devastated. The soldier reports that the enemy is at the castle gate. They need to escape before it's too late. But it looks like Timothy has already given up. He is lost in thought, remembering how his father ended his life right in this very room. His father had used his own death as a trap to kill Gerald, Timothy's greatest obstacle. That moment had given Timothy the opportunity to climb to the peak of power. In just 1 year, he had cleaned up the eastern and northern regions, exiled his sister, and stood unrivaled. He had believed that unifying Greycastle was only a matter of time. But in just 3 days, just 3 goddamn days, everything he built has been shredded to pieces. He throws a tantrum, raging that Roland would never have won if he hadn't collaborated with witches and devils. And now, he's furious at the church for failing to eradicate witches from the world. If it weren't for them, Roland wouldn't have had access to these ridiculously powerful weapons. After venting his frustrations, Timothy finally makes his decision. He won't die here. That fool of a brother should be the one to go to hell, not him. He heads for the secret tunnel, his last hope of escape. The tunnel has a hidden entrance and a permanent locking mechanism. Once it's sealed, it's impossible to break through. Lined with stones of divine judgment and deadly traps, he's certain Roland won't be able to track his movements. Timothy just needs to make it to the northern and eastern aristocrats who still support him. After all, he promoted a few dukes there. Surely, they'll shelter him. However, Timothy doesn't know if the northern or eastern aristocrats will still take him in now that the capital has fallen. He thinks maybe the church might, but he's also aware that while those fools may be arrogant and inefficient, they're surely not going to let Roland tighten his grip on the kingdom. If the church grants him the revenge he deserves, Timothy is ready to hand them his father's kingdom. All he wants is Roland's execution, and then he plans to torture those cursed witches to death. But when he finally reaches the other end of the tunnel, all he finds are soldiers waiting for him. The siege of the royal city has finally come to an end. As Prince Roland marches through the city, the soldiers welcome him with cheers. The captain of the Second Army approaches, bringing good news. The castle road has been secured, and the city now belongs to Roland, making him the new king of Grey Castle. Well, Prince also can't shake off the sacrifices it took to reach here. This has been the fiercest battle for the First Army. Their casualties haven't been fully recorded yet, but over 20 bodies have been counted, after Nana's healing, that is. The royal decree for the throne has finally been sealed. As King Roland enters the palace, he notices a few familiar faces standing respectfully in line to welcome their new king. The first in line is Treasury Minister Lauren Muir, followed by the old Foreign Minister, Brent Fellon. There's also Judiciary Minister Paul, the current Prime Minister Duke Wake, and Communications Director Marshall. All of them had served the late King Wimbledon, and some of their families can trace their roots back to the founding of the Wimbledon family, the time when Timothy Wimbledon inherited the throne. These men all served him faithfully. Prince Roland can tell that they seem willing to pledge their loyalty to him as well. However, he doesn't need them. This won't be a conference, it will be a court of justice. He addresses everyone present, declaring that Timothy Wimbledon murdered the first prince, Gerald Wimbledon. He instigated riots, allied with the church, and is now imprisoned, awaiting his punishment. Soon, his crimes will be known in every corner of the continent. He then questions if anyone has anything to say. The current Prime Minister, Duke Wake, steps forward, admitting that Timothy's crimes cannot be ignored. He claims that he had tried to convince Timothy to reconsider his actions, but to no avail. He expresses relief that Prince Roland has finally cleared the dark cloud that hung over the castle. But Roland knows better. Everyone standing here played a role in enabling Timothy's atrocities. There is no excuse for that. He makes it clear that whatever they say now will not be of any use. However, Lauren Muir reminds Prince Roland that when Timothy rose to power, he promoted many of his personal allies, such as Langley Scar and Duke Malus. The knights and the army were under their control, leaving little room for opposition. Another official quickly agrees, and the mustached man even claims that when Timothy executed Gerald Wimbledon, he also purged the court. With the knights holding all the power, no one had any way of stopping him. Prince Roland acknowledges this. In their regard, what they are saying is true. But to separate those who were merely caught in Timothy's rule from those who were truly devoted to him, Roland decides to play a little game, one that will allow everyone present to prove their innocence. Prince Roland states that it is a simple interrogation game, he asks, and they answer. If anyone lies, they lose. He further clarifies that each person will only have one chance. If they lose, they might face the guillotine, slave labor, exile, or property seizure. The game follows the rules of the court, making it entirely fair. First in line is Duke Wake. Prince Roland asks him a single question. When Timothy forced the refugees to attack the western region, did he participate? Wake hesitates before answering. Eventually, he admits that he followed Timothy's orders to gather refugees from the eastern and southern regions, but he claims he had no knowledge of Timothy's true intentions. However, Prince Roland can tell he is lying. Declaring him a liar, he sentences Wake to prison for the rest of his life before demanding the next person to step forward. The other officials tense up at the sight of their fellow being condemned so easily. Prince then warns them further. If they think they can outsmart him, they should reconsider. Lying will not help them because he can see through lies effortlessly. His words send a chill through the room, and panic sets in. One by one, the officials begin rattling out every detail of the atrocities they committed, desperate to prove their innocence. After an intense interrogation, the game finally comes to an end. Those who are found guilty are thrown into the dungeon, while the remaining ones are allowed to leave the castle. With the matter settled, Prince Roland now turns his focus to restoring order in the castle. Once stability is ensured, he will summon the people back to the city. Prince Roland wants to make it clear that his governance will be unlike that of his father or Timothy. To drive the point home, he reminds everyone of the game they just played and warns them that there will be more like it. Sorry for calling Roland a prince, since he is now a king. I will try my best to not call out him with his previous title. Then we hear Roland's thoughts. He voices his frustration. He does not wish to stay in this place longer than necessary, but he has no choice. The capital still needs to be managed, and for now, he must rely on smaller aristocrats with clean backgrounds until the city hall's trained officials take over. After spending a day sorting out the mess, it is time to meet his brother in the dungeon. As he descends, he notes that this dungeon is far better than those in the outer districts. No leaking water, no rats or cockroaches scuttling around, and no stench of mold and moisture. Finally, he arrives face to face with Timothy. The moment Timothy lays eyes on him, he is left questioning if this imposing figure is even the same Roland Wimbledon he once knew. But Roland makes it clear that he is indeed Roland Wimbledon. Timothy keeps denying it. insisting that the brother he knew would never look at him like this. Roland merely smirks in response before sharing a memory from their childhood, like how Garcia and Gerald had once dared him to go into the chapel's basement when he was 12. Timothy had stolen a key from the guards and used it to lock him inside, leaving him trapped until morning, only to return and mock him. Back then, Roland had neither the courage to fight back, nor the bravery to face his older brother. But now things have changed. Timothy begins blaring, claiming that Roland is a devil, and some foul creature has taken his appearance to steal the kingdom. But Roland calmly reminds him that he is no better than any devil himself. He murdered their father and pinned the blame on their brother just to seize the throne. He reminds Timothy that their father despised the church, yet Timothy allied with them. He used innocent people as pawns to invade their siblings' territories. Now, in just a year, the kingdom is in complete ruin, cities are burning, refugees are everywhere. Even a devil would not have been so cruel. Timothy shouts in response, insisting that he did not kill their father. Their father committed suicide, he was possessed by the devil, just like Roland. This unexpected claim catches Roland off guard. Timothy further comes clean that he is telling the truth. Their father was lying in bed as usual, but then, out of nowhere, he took a dagger and stabbed himself, all while smiling. He had even been wearing a stone of divine judgment. It happened so suddenly that no one had time to stop him. This revelation gives Roland pause. If the king had been wearing a stone of divine judgment, then how could he have been controlled? Nightingale, standing nearby, offers a reminder. There exists a type of pure witch who can take on the appearance of anyone. The pieces begin to fit together. If the church was behind this, it would make perfect sense for them to use the throne decree to throw the kingdom into chaos. However, speculation is not enough. They need proof. And the only way to get the truth is from a church archbishop. Nevertheless, Roland confronts his brother one last time, making it clear that there is no escape from the consequences of his actions. He reminds Timothy that he murdered Gerald, spread violence throughout the kingdom, allied with the church, and used berserker pills. His reckless rule has led to the deaths of countless people. There will be no cover-ups, no fabricated trials like Gerald's. This time, everything will be real. Timothy's crimes will be publicized for all to see. He will be put on trial, and then, just like Gerald, he will face the guillotine. But Timothy refuses to accept his fate. He keeps ranting about Roland being a pawn of devils, insisting that he will not allow a demon to rule the kingdom. He argues that even if Roland becomes king, he will never be able to stand against the church. Only he, Timothy, truly understands what they are capable of, because he has read their father's notes. But Roland reminds his dumb shit half-witted brother that he knows far more than Timothy could ever imagine. He doesn't just understand the church's schemes, he also knows what the future holds. He is well aware of the difficulties ahead, and he knows that Timothy does not have what it takes to lead their people through the trials to come. For Roland, this is not just about punishing a traitor, it is about preparing for the greater challenge ahead. Timothy's rule has ended, and so must his life. Still, he assures Timothy that his journey to hell will not be a lonely one. Many of his loyal followers will accompany him, so he can rest easy, knowing he won't be alone. With that, Roland turns away, having nothing more to say. He leaves the rest to Fox. Timothy, meanwhile, continues his tantrum, screaming and struggling against his fate, but his cries go unheard as Roland descends from the dungeons. Fox then introduces himself to the fallen king, calling himself Hill Fox, a former member of the Pigeon Hat Circus group. Timothy may not recognize him, but this man remembers this shit of a king all too well. Fox claims that because of Timothy, he lost his wife and was forced to become a rat. He has always tracked Timothy's movements, reporting them to Prince Roland. Timothy's plans to manufacture snow powder and forcibly deploy civilian troops into the western region, all of them were leaked by Fox himself. Timothy, of course, starts ranting again, insisting that Roland is the real devil and that Fox shouldn't serve him just for the sake of a woman. But Fox doesn't give a damn who he serves, as long as he can get his revenge. If it meant serving a devil and going to hell with him, so be it. And now he's more than happy to help stoke the fire that will burn Timothy to ashes. The scene transitions to Nightingale and Wendy, getting ready for bed. Wendy feels exhausted after dropping all those bombs from the balloon. Maggie and Lightning have already fallen asleep. Wendy then questions Nightingale if she plans to visit her old home in Silver City. She figures it would only take half an hour if she takes Maggie with her. She also reminds her about the little brother she left behind. But it's clear Nightingale has no desire to see the people who abandoned her. So she makes an excuse, claiming that this is a time to keep the city in order. Enemies are lurking everywhere, and she can't afford to leave King Roland even for a single step. Once things stabilize, she'll have plenty of chances to go. Well, Wendy had thought she would emphasize her severance from the Glenn family like she always had, but it seems she doesn't hate her brother anymore. Nightingale believes that if it weren't for his betrayal, she wouldn't have met Wendy or King Roland. She chooses to cherish her current life and forget the old one. Later, Wendy falls asleep, while Nightingale remains awake, reflecting on the situation. She recalls how the kingdom has finally come under Roland's control, and how witches can now live openly, like normal people, in the light. However, she herself has no intention of abandoning the dark either. She finds solace in the shadows, the only place where she can have time to herself. Time to admire Roland from afar, without interfering in his life. The next day arrives, and Margaret, Roland's old friend, comes to visit him. It looks like she's here to share something of utmost importance, as she insists on meeting Roland privately. First, Margaret apologizes for barging in like this, but she explains that her friend Thunder wishes to meet the king. Naturally, Roland is startled, because as far as he remembers, Thunder was supposed to have died in an exploration accident. But Margaret reminds him that Thunder is the kind of guy who never leaves a trail. He especially didn't want Lightning to find out. And that's precisely why Margaret is here, sharing this in secret. Thunder had initially planned to contact Roland through Tilly, but the sudden attack Roland launched on the capital caught him off guard. Margaret explains that Thunder also saw something incredible at Phantom Island, something that might be closely related to the ruins. That alone makes him very interested in meeting Roland. He's currently in the capital, having just arrived yesterday. Roland takes note of how Margaret doesn't seem all that surprised that Thunder is still alive, which makes him suspect she already knew. Margaret doesn't deny it. She admits that she was aware and apologizes for not telling him sooner. She also reveals that the magic stone Lightning wears on her necklace is how Thunder has been tracking her location. She goes on to explain that Thunder was the one who sent her to Border Town in the first place, to make sure his daughter was doing well. When Lightning chose to settle there, Thunder decided to hide his whereabouts, hoping it would dissuade her from becoming an explorer. Upon hearing the truth, Roland feels like a fool. He had almost believed Margaret was genuinely fascinated by Border Town and all the business opportunities it had to offer. But back to the main topic. Roland states that the kingdom is still a complete mess right now, so there's no way he can leave the castle. Instead, he gives her permission to bring Thunder here if he truly wishes to meet. And he promises to keep it a secret from Lightning as well. Once Margaret is gone, Nightingale reappears, teasing Roland about how he failed to see through her lies back then. She reminds him that Margaret was wearing that huge stone of divine judgment at the time. Before Roland can respond, a soldier rushes in, reporting that an aristocrat claiming to be an old friend of the king has arrived. The supposed friend's name is Yorko. The moment the name sinks in, Roland nearly chokes on his tea. And just like that, the aristocrat in question barges inside. Yorko is quite the charming figure. He is full of admiration for how King Roland managed to defeat his demonic older brother so quickly. It's been a whole year since they last met, yet Yorko notes that Roland hasn't changed at all. For some backstory, Yorko, also known as the Magic Hand, was once on good terms with Roland. Back when the fourth prince was shut out by the Big Three and even rejected by his own little sister, Yorko took him under his wing, introducing him to a life of drinking and partying. It was Yorko's presence that pulled the old Roland out of his misery, giving him a ragtag group of friends, something he never had inside the castle. At that time, the fourth prince considered Yorko to be his best friend. With his sharp taste in clothing, refined manners, and skill in gambling, Yorko easily won the hearts of many rich young ladies. And as usual, he's here for one reason, to invite Roland out for a drink. The man of culture even leans in and whispers in Roland's ear, casually asking if he'd prefer to spend the night with Madame Ross or Miss Kingfisher. Of course, Nightingale, listening from the shadows, begins to exude such a menacing aura that the air around her starts to freeze. Sensing danger, Roland quickly tries to escape her wrath, insisting that he never did anything with any of those girls and has no relationship with them whatsoever. Technically, this isn't a lie, especially since the current Roland never had any romantic entanglements, so Nightingale wouldn't be able to detect anything off. But Yorko, being Yorko, keeps insisting otherwise, making Nightingale grow even more suspicious. Eventually, Yorko lets it slide, deciding to just hang out like old times. He excitedly tells Roland about the new spots that have opened up in the city, places they could go and enjoy themselves. But Roland quickly shuts that idea down, making it clear that he no longer has such worldly desires. They go back and forth for a bit, but Roland firmly reminds him that he's a king now. He can't afford to be as careless as before. Besides, he knows Yorko didn't come all this way just to reminisce about the past. So he wants his old friend to cut to the chase, as there's no need to dance around the real reason he's here. Finally, Yorko comes clean. He wants to work in Roland's government. Roland is caught off guard by this, but Yorko continues, saying he'd like to be one of his ministers. He doesn't need an important role like managing the treasury or judiciary. He'd be fine overseeing the patrol or something, like Knight Ironheart. Roland can hardly believe what he's hearing. If he hands over the patrol guard to Yorko, the capital's reputation might be in ruins. But Yorko seems unusually confident that he can keep all those rats in check. While Roland understands that giving him a governmental position is fine, he still needs to work it out with City Hall and figure out a suitable role for him. He assures Yorko that he'll get a letter soon enough. With that promise made, Yorko leaves. Once Roland is alone, Nightingale reappears, immediately teasing him about Madame Ross and Miss Kingfisher. She wants to know who they were exactly. Roland tries to brush it off casually, explaining that they were just two women he met once. He wasn't familiar with them and didn't even know their real names. That's just how it is with aristocrats. Everyone wears a false mask, putting on a show, and once they part ways, no one bothers to remember anything. Nightingale continues her interrogation, but eventually, Roland manages to convince her to drop it. Now that he's free from Nightingale's scrutiny, it's It's finally time for him to meet the legendary adventurer, Thunder. When Thunder appears before Roland, he pulls back his hood and greets the prince with proper manners. Roland thanks him for helping Tilly after she moved to Sleeping Island. Thunder assures him that it was no problem at all, as she provided great support during his expedition. In fact, if it weren't for the witches, Phantom Island would have been the limit of his team's range. He then asks if Tilly mentioned the sea line to Roland in her letters. But Roland has no idea what that is. Seeing his confusion, Thunder proceeds to explain everything about the sea line and his recent exploits. After explaining his situation, Thunder expresses his desire to purchase a ship capable of sailing against the wind and currents. Money is not an issue, and he's willing to pay any price Roland asks. Roland accepts the request, stating that money isn't important to him either. He assures Thunder that he'll calculate the price fairly and build the ship using the best technology available. He promises that the ship will go far beyond his own sphere of influence, and he genuinely wants to support Thunder in this endeavor. Exploring the unknown could change the fate of humanity, so he'll fully back Thunder's expeditions, on the condition that Thunder reports any new discoveries to him immediately. Thunder acknowledges this and promises to do as instructed. After their conversation, Roland reflects on everything Thunder revealed about the sea line. Seawater that defies gravity, flowing upwards like a wall, and a ship traveling vertically while everything appears level as usual. If this wasn't coming from the most famous explorer in the world, Roland wouldn't have believed a word of it. This suggests that something is interfering with gravity, creating a unique magnetic field. But since the true nature of gravity itself isn't fully understood, he can't reach any conclusions just yet, as it might even be related to magic. Nightingale reappears after quietly smuggling Thunder out of the castle. Noticing Roland's contemplative mood, she questions him about it. Instead of answering directly, he asks her an odd question. Does she know what elves are? They're mythical humanoid creatures with pointy ears, known for living in forests, elegant, agile, and immortal. Well, Nightingale admits that she's never even heard of elves. In response, Roland explains that he's seen them in storybooks. They are fictional creatures that were once spread across the continent but were eventually pushed deeper into the forests by humans, to the point of extinction. They were intelligent, but their numbers were far smaller than those of humans. The elves never stood a chance against the overwhelming human armies. Forced to retreat into barren lands, their civilization began to decline, and eventually, humans surpassed them in technology. In the end, the elves were completely subjugated, enslaved, with no way to fight back. Right now, Roland warns, humanity is in the same position as the elves once were. The technology humans currently possess is primitive. They are confined to a corner of the continent, knowing almost nothing about the outside world. He fears that if humanity doesn't broaden its vision, if people don't seek to understand the world around them, they will eventually be overpowered, just like the elves. The two divine wars have already cost nearly 1,000 years of progress, and he can only hope there's still time to change the course of history. The scene transitions to Border Town, where Sister Soraya is using her paint magic to help the neighbors. After finishing up, she hops onto her bicycle and makes her way toward the castle. Upon arriving, she finds her fellow sisters already gathered, prepared for their afternoon tea party. As they sit down to eat, Soraya begins to doze off in the middle of the meal. She quickly snaps back to attention when Sister Scroll calls for everyone's focus. Today's class has been cancelled. Instead, they will be testing Echo's abilities. Sister Echo steps forward, standing above the rest, ready to begin her song. The moment her voice fills the air, a shift takes place. Out of nowhere, the entire group finds themselves enveloped in a warm, cozy hot spring. The sensation is so soothing that all the witches are completely entranced, basking in pure bliss. For the first time, they experience the true power of rejuvenation, and it feels absolutely euphoric. The scene transitions to King Roland, waking up in his castle. The sky is clear, and the sun shines brightly. A perfect day for an execution. And we already know who the sacrificial goat will be. After a week of preparation, the evidence of the church conspiring with Timothy to overthrow the late king is now irrefutable. Not many aristocrats are being executed today, aside from Timothy, his underlings, the former prime minister, and the head judge. The rest of the condemned are all church followers. By the end of the day, the capital's church will be uprooted completely. No one who participated in the plague has been spared. When these criminals meet their end, the crowd will likely erupt in cheers. As Roland stands by the window, Nightingale asks if he isn't going to watch the execution take place with his own eyes. But the prince replies that Iron Axe and Tassa have it under control. He has more important matters to deal with. This morning he arranged for the Central Command to return to Neverwinter, and Barov will be arriving soon to help manage the aristocrats. He also believes Kyle Sichi will be eager to present his latest research progress to the Royal Alchemy Society. Just then, Yorko barges into the room, carrying his usual charismatic demeanor. He's here to pay his respects to Roland, because, like many others, he hadn't initially believed that the church was responsible. But now that Bishop Philip has confessed, the truth is undeniable. Before Yorko can start rambling any further, Roland silently hands him a letter. As Yorko reads it, he finds out that it's a job offer from the prince. A long-term ambassador position, stationed in Radiant City, the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn. Roland explains that an appointed ambassador holds a much higher status than a regular one. The foreign king will treat him as an equal. But of course, Roland has chosen this post for a reason. In Dawn, Yorko can rampage as much as he pleases. The aristocratic ladies there are famous for their beauty. Perhaps this will be the perfect place for him. Yorko naturally accepts the offer without hesitation. Now that it's settled, Roland insists on teaching him proper etiquette before he departs for his new position. The prince hopes Yorko will settle in quickly and ensure the alliance remains strong. They will be fighting against the church together, after all. Yorko acknowledges this and leaves in a noticeably good mood. With that done, Roland turns to Nightingale. He instructs her to bring Sylvie, Lightning, and Maggie because he plans to visit the astronomers. They finally arrive at their destination in the balloon. Once Roland steps onto solid ground, he finds the army captain and Renee already waiting. The captain promptly reports that the perimeter is secured. Nothing is getting in or out, not even a mouse. Renee also reassures him that the astronomers' stones of divine judgment have been confiscated, so Miss Sylvie's surveillance won't be interrupted. With that, they introduce the scholar, Missan. The old man steps forward and bows respectfully before the prince. Roland immediately questions whether Missan is his real name. The old man responds positively and explains that it is a title awarded by the Astronomy Society to those who have discovered new stars. He named the Missan star, which forms the Missan halo with 3 others, following a cycle across the sky. He introduces the rest of the astronomers, 8 masters in total, each with their own discoveries. They express their willingness to share their knowledge with King Roland, teaching him all they know about the stars and the cycles of day and night. But Roland has little interest in learning about the stars themselves. He promptly requests to see all of their constellation maps. Once inside, he meticulously examines the maps. However, after reviewing them thoroughly, he fails to find any trace of the North Star or Sagittarius. A troubling thought crosses his mind. Perhaps this is not Earth at all, but a different world entirely. There is a sun and a moon, yet the sun is just one of countless stars in the vast Milky Way. The universe holds billions of galaxies, each filled with their own celestial bodies. It wouldn't be strange for this world to exist in some stable foreign solar system. Still, something feels off. The materials found here are so similar to those on Earth, but the evolution of life is a product of chance. A similar environment wouldn't necessarily produce identical results. Even more troubling, devils and demons don't seem like a natural product of evolution at all. And unlike Earth's astronomers, the scholars of Grey Castle have no concept of a zodiac. They don't recognize the 12 constellations. In fact, the stars in their maps appear far more concentrated than those seen from Earth's night sky. This would only happen if they were located closer to the galaxy's center, where stars are more densely packed. That realization only makes the possibility of this being Earth even smaller. Roland then asks how many people are part of the Astronomy Society. Missan responds that they have 12 astronomers, 156 students, and 67 craftsmen. Hearing this, Roland wastes no time making his decision. He announces his plan to shut down the observatory. He orders them all to pack their belongings and relocate to Neverwinter City with him. Naturally, the old scholar immediately raises his voice in protest. But Roland doesn't believe in fortune-telling or the idea that stars can predict the future. He makes his own decisions, and as the king of Grey Castle, he has the authority to shut this place down. In the western region, he declares, they will learn the true knowledge of the stars, not use them as mere tools for divination. Yet the old man refuses to back down. He insists that their work must not be interrupted, that they must continue to watch the sky at all times. And his reasoning is that this is an order that came from Roland's own ancestors. Roland quickly shakes his head, dismissing the old man's claim. There's no way to verify if any of this is even true. But the old coot, Missan, suddenly reveals that he does have proof, something meant for the king's eyes only. Curious but skeptical, Roland follows him into a secret chamber deep within the observatory. Once inside, Missan finally reveals the truth. He explains that he is merely carrying out an order from one of Roland's ancestors. The rulers of the past knew that a future descendant would one day attempt to shut down the astronomy tower. This, he claims, is not the first time it has happened. While alchemy and astronomy are both advanced sciences, they cannot be compared. Alchemy is a significant source of income for the kingdom, generating wealth through its discoveries. In contrast, astronomers require heavy investments, craftsmen, crystal lenses, and time, while producing nothing of immediate value. To prevent future rulers from dismantling the astronomy tower for the sake of saving money, the ancestors established an unbreakable rule. This rule was engraved onto a golden brick, ensuring its preservation across generations. Missan presents the ancient relic and reads aloud the inscription, "No one shall interfere with the astronomy tower's duty to watch the skies, for within them lies the fate of the universe." He then reveals that the Wimbledon family has been entrusted with a mission that spans centuries. It began when the very first Wimbledon set foot on this continent. This message is not hidden from the throne, yet there is a condition. A successor may only learn of this truth upon reaching the age of 30. The ancestors believed that if a ruler learned of this too early, he might panic, leading the kingdom to ruin. Missan then delivers the most shocking revelation of all. For generations, their true purpose has not been merely to chart the stars or study their cycles. All this time, they have been searching for the Star of Doom. He describes it as a crimson star, or rather, a red moon. When it descends, the world will be plunged into an unfathomable disaster. Roland narrows his eyes. He struggles to grasp the abstract nonsense this old man is spouting and demands he get to the point. Miss Anne then proceeds to elaborate. This knowledge has been passed down orally through generations of chairmen. According to legend, a red star travels across the sky. When it appears at night, resembling a crescent moon, the world will be destroyed. Their duty, he says, is to find it before it transforms. If they can track its path, they might be able to predict doomsday. Of course, Roland has no idea what in the hell any of this means. Miss Anne acknowledges the king's skepticism, but he is not surprised. The stars are always changing. The Star of Doom follows a specific orbit, one that spans centuries. It is rumored to complete a full cycle every 400 to 500 years. Its path is vast, meaning it only gradually comes close to their world. But when it finally nears, it will change. It will transition from a dim, unseen object to a blazing red star, and eventually, it will take the shape of a crescent moon. However, the ancient order left behind by the ancestors did not specify exactly when the Star of Doom would descend. It is entirely possible that it still lingers somewhere in the sky, beyond their reach, invisible, but approaching. Miss Anne reveals that he has been watching the skies for the past 40 years, ever since he became a disciple of the Astronomy Tower. He has never once stopped. Perhaps 10 years ago he might have given up. But ever since he succeeded Scholar Meteor as chairman and inherited this sacred duty, he finally understood what he was truly looking at. This will be the first true star, a prophecy unlike any other, and the very reason the Astronomy Tower exists. Unfortunately, he does not have much time left to continue watching. Roland then questions that, if this so-called Star of Doom truly marks the end of the world, then surely the ancestors must have left behind instructions on how to survive. Well, it looks like Miss Anne has no answers for this daunting question. He cannot offer Roland an answer. He can do nothing but gaze upon the sky on the king's behalf. It is the king's duty to lead his people and ensure their survival. Should the earth rupture or the sky rain fire, as long as they can predict it, humanity will have a chance. Thus, he pleads with Roland not to shut down the Astronomy Tower. Roland considers his words. He understands the old man's concerns. For now, he decides to leave it at that. The Astronomy Tower will remain standing. He will send them better stargazing equipment and teach them the true knowledge of the stars. And as for when the red moon descends, Roland assures the old man that it will not be the end of the world. No matter what catastrophe awaits, he will ensure humanity survives. With that, King Roland departs, boarding his balloon and leaving the tower behind. Initially, he had planned to relocate the astronomers to the western region, but Miss Anne has spent decades watching the skies. Perhaps it is only fitting that his journey ends here as well. Still, Roland has a hunch. The Star of Doom is likely the very same phenomenon Agatha once mentioned. When the red moon appears, doomsday will follow. A prophecy and warning. And most likely, somehow it is also connected to the witches. Sylvie shares the same suspicion. After all, why else would Grey Castle pursue it, even when their own kingdom was not yet complete? The survivors of the Alliance brought the grim news of the Red Moon, a celestial event tied to their efforts in rebuilding humanity. They had entrusted the mission of stargazing to the earliest astronomers, and one of them just so happened to be an ancestor of Roland. Roland, however, mentions that he has been reading his family's history in his father's library recently. To his surprise, there was no mention of any astronomers or the Astronomy Tower. His first ancestor, Maud Wimbledon, and the first king, Talak Wimbledon, were both recorded in his family's lineage, but nothing about the construction of the Astronomy Tower. It seems someone erased that part of history entirely. Nightingale is now also invested in the story, and is curious to know who could have done such a thing. Roland, in deep thought, replies that it wasn't an accident. If someone had gone to the lengths of engraving such an order on a gold brick, they would have documented it elsewhere too. If it was an intentional act of hiding the truth, there is no reason for leaving traces of the Astronomy Tower's existence at all. Every successor was meant to know the true purpose of the tower. There's a mystery surrounding the Wimbledon family from 400 years ago, and Roland is determined to uncover it. The scene shifts to the office of Duke Carlin, where one of his workers delivers unexpected news. Roland's army breached the capital walls in a single day. King Timothy, unable to escape, is now trapped inside. Duke Carlin is baffled by this report, while the worker continues, detailing the power of Roland's weapons. Their rate of fire is devastating, and they are almost unstoppable. Even Timothy's berserker army, known for their ferocity, couldn't stand against the onslaught. The weapons tore through them, leaving crippling injuries or death in their wake. Carlin slumps over his chair in despair. He can see everything falling apart. Just a week ago, he received King Timothy's orders to become the newly appointed Duke of the Northern Region, and Carlin accepted. His family had already allied with Timothy to support him. There's no doubt that his actions will be seen as an act of rebellion by Roland Wimbledon, and his prosperous days will be over. Just then, a beautiful lady clad in white comes into view, asking her father about the cause of his distress. The poor guy is in tears as he jumps toward his daughter, Iris, revealing that the Candle family is facing a great disaster. They pledged loyalty to Timothy, who just lost to Roland. Iris remains nonchalant, not surprised at all. She already knew this would happen. which is exactly why she refused to marry Timothy in the first place. Her father is shocked. How did she even predict Timothy's downfall? To this, Iris simply states that Timothy was never fit to be king. Carlin then asks her who she wants to marry. He's really curious to know who she thinks is better than Timothy. Iris, however, decides to put the marriage talk aside and focus on the real issue. First, she wants her father to order his soldiers to return, all those who left for Grey Castle. Carlin insists that this is impossible since they've already been gone for 4 days. But his cunning daughter has a plan. She suggests sending some men to Valleytown first. They'll get there by tonight if they leave now. From there, they can take a boat to the capital, arriving a day earlier than the soldiers. No matter which route the soldiers take, they'll have to pass through the North Gate. That way, they can intercept them on the outskirts of the capital. Carlin is absolutely blown away by his daughter's quick-witted thinking. He hadn't even considered this plan himself. Without wasting time, he quickly orders his butler to follow her instructions. Once the butler leaves, Iris turns to her father and asks if Night City's walls will be able to stop Roland. Well, given the kind of weaponry Roland has, it sounds nearly impossible to him. She then reminds him that even if they manage to pull back their soldiers, it won't change the fact that they are still enemies in Roland's eyes. They served Timothy, and that won't be forgotten. Even if Roland doesn't come for them now, he will in the future. To save the family, she believes they need to take bolder action. Carlin quickly catches on to what she's suggesting. But even if they pledge loyalty to Roland, how can they be sure he'll trust them? In response, it is then she declares that she will accomplish this task through sheer goodwill. The scene then transitions to Duke Candle hosting a grand party. All the major nobles from the neighboring regions have gathered, discussing the future of the northern lands now that Roland Wimbledon has successfully captured Grey Castle. Their endless yapping is pointless. They all secretly harbor ill intentions toward Roland. The loudest of them, the one speaking the most boldly against Roland, suddenly finds himself pierced by Iris's sword. His life ends in an instant. Panic spreads through the room. Within minutes, Carlin's daughter and his soldiers seize control of everything. One defiant duke still insists on fighting. Iris takes him on in a duel, and before long, she defeats him miserably. With the room under his command, Carlin finally speaks. He gives the nobles a choice: either join the corpses on the floor, or swear loyalty to the new king, Roland Wimbledon. Without a second doubt, everyone surrenders. Later we find Carlin with his daughter. Carlin questions her if Roland will accept this. Iris claims she's not sure if what they did will work out, but at least they've made their intentions clear. The fourth prince holds the power to determine the fate of the northern region. He may decide to appoint his own people to manage the land. She then instructs her father not to loosen up. He still needs to follow up and seize the two lords' territories by tomorrow morning. Roland's impression of the Candle family will determine how this plays out. Iris decides to take the heads of those two lords they just killed to the capital and requests her father to appoint her as his ambassador. The scene transitions to the capital, where the old man Baroff and Kyle Sichi have arrived after a long, mundane journey. Baroff is literally in tears, thinking about how Prince Roland destroyed Timothy just as Roland had intended. The operation went as smoothly as it possibly could. But Baroff is shocked when he learns that the prince has not started preparations for the coronation, which he believes should be done as soon as possible. However, Roland claims he doesn't have time for that right now. A proper coronation requires months of preparation. Crafting the golden crown, the jeweled staff, inviting the church and the other 3 kingdoms. An unimportant coronation would only slow down the second half of his spring assault. Roland then reveals that his ambassador to the Kingdom of Dawn will soon depart. He'll make sure to ask him to carry this message along as well, and it won't be too late to start on the coronation matter once the Kingdom of Dawn confirms things. The prince then addresses Kyle Sichi, reminding him that he summoned him here because he wants him to recruit from the Royal Alchemy Society. Since Sichi already knows most of the members there, he'll be able to convince them easily. Later, the prince arrives at the Alchemy Society in his balloon, where Chairman Lenin and his colleagues are already waiting. Once the balloon lands, the prince hops out, and Chairman Lenin doesn't forget to greet their new king. Being an alchemist through and through, Chairman Lenin initiates the conversation by mentioning how he's heard about the fourth prince's crystals, glass, and perfume inventions. To this, the prince acknowledges the praise and reveals that the sales of these items even reach as far as the Bay Islands, providing the western region with a rich source of income. That's why he built an alchemy workshop in a border town. Chairman Lenin is sure that it must have been a difficult task to build the workshop, considering the huge investments needed, especially since the border town was a place struggling with poverty. The prince acknowledges this and admits that the workshop currently produces many goods, including glass and perfume. Naturally, he's curious as to what the Alchemy Society spends so much money on. Roland then introduces his chief alchemist, Kyle Sichi, and shares that Sichi will inspect the products of their alchemy. He mentions that he wants to shut down the workshop if it hasn't produced anything new in the past few years. Upon hearing this, Chairman Lenin is rattled to his core. He quickly expresses that the prince's suggestion isn't a good idea. He also believes Roland doesn't fully understand alchemy, as it's vast and complex, with each formula resulting in different outcomes. But Kyle Sichi steps up to shut down these amateurs. He apologizes to King Roland on behalf of the loudmouthed fools who've barely skimmed the surface of the wide world of alchemy. Kyle is more than ready to prove that their formulas are antiquated and outdated, and he's willing to show whether the results are useful or not. The tension builds between the two alchemists, with Chairman Lennon gritting his teeth at Kyle Sichi's boldness. They enter the lab, where Kyle Sichi is ready to prove how lacking these amateurs are in their experiments and knowledge. At first, Kyle's method doesn't sit well with them. The others believe they've seen it before since it's already recorded in alchemy's history books. So Kyle decides to show them something more extraordinary. With a bit of alchemy mumbo-jumbo, he literally produces gold from regular stones, leaving the bald-headed chairman absolutely bewildered. The chairman is skeptical. He's sure that if Kyle Sichi had truly created real gold, he would have bought up the entire Grey Castle by now. He's convinced that what Kyle just produced is simply copper. Kyle, however, makes it clear that he didn't choose this path for money, but to understand the world. And as for the authenticity of his experiment, he's ready to prove whether it's copper or gold. So, they begin the next experiment to confirm whether Kyle's creation is indeed gold. Meanwhile, Chairman Lennon has a sense of familiarity about Kyle Sichi. It finally hits him that this man is the same person he rejected a long time ago. Kyle eventually proves the authenticity of the gold, and the others standing there confirm that it is indeed real gold. After driving his point home, Kyle once again invites them to come to the border town with him. He promises to teach them everything he knows, including every possible alchemy formula and the secrets behind the creation of everything. Later, we see Roland and Kyle together. It looks like Kyle is already ready to depart for the border town without wasting a single day. Kyle doesn't want to develop any feelings here, and there's still a lot of work to be done at the lab and chemical factories. And if they want the gunpowder production line to continue functioning normally, he'll have to return to Neverwinter City. For clarity, Neverwinter City is the new name for the border town. Sometimes I forget and say border town, so don't be confused. Roland has no choice but to let Kyle go and promises to prepare a ship for him to depart. Once Kyle is out of earshot, Nightingale pops up. Seeing the unusual happiness on Roland's face, she questions him about it. She teases him, asking if he's perhaps excited just thinking about Miss Kingfisher and Madame Rose. The prince reminds her that the source of his happiness is actually the fact that Director Sichi's chemistry demonstration was extremely successful. There are 320 alchemists and apprentices willing to go to the western region. Most of them are already experienced, so they just need a little training, making them incredibly valuable resources gained from taking the capital. Though he admits that this isn't the only source of his happiness. He's even more pleased that Chairman Lennon, Riley, and Archer, all respected chairmen, are also willing to go to Neverwinter City. Roland is genuinely glad to see people volunteering to help the kingdom thrive. Roland then shares that they should also be get-going, because not only Lotus and Honey are coming back from Slumber Island, but there are also new witches Tilly has sent, which he wants to meet eagerly. The scene then transitions to the boat sailing, carrying all the witches from Slumber Island. All the witches are lively and excited to reach Border Town. Seeing this, the captain notes that all the witches seem chatty and full of energy, except for two, Evie and Soft Feathers. The reason for their silence is clear. Unlike the others, they are actually from the Bloodfang Association in Wolfheart. Compared to Tilly, they are more loyal to the leader of Bloodfang, Heidi Morgan. The scene then shifts to Ash and Tilly spending some time alone together. There, we learn that it was Heidi Morgan who asked Tilly to take Evie and Soft Feathers along and send them to Border Town with Lotus. Morgan also wants to establish good connections with Roland. Tilly had no reason to refuse, so she agreed to send them. But Ash doesn't understand why Morgan thinks she can get as close to Roland as Tilly is. After all, Tilly is Roland's sister. To this, Tilly reminds Ash that Heidi is royalty from the Wolfheart Kingdom, and personal connections matter less the higher up you are. It's the same in any kingdom. Morgan understands this and wants Roland's support. Ash seems upset with Tilly for accepting Morgan's request, especially since Morgan once challenged Camilla for the title of the strongest battle witch, an insult to the witch equality Tilly believes in. But Tilly assures her that everything is fine. She reminds her that Slumber Island is their home, and every witch is a free citizen here. As long as they aren't putting anyone in danger, they won't stop them. Also, it's not a bad thing for them to go to the western region. You see, most of Bloodfang consists of battle witches, and the church's influence has been suffocating. They've had to stick together just to survive. But now that the Bay's churches have been crushed, it's only natural for them to feel confident about their own abilities, and they want to expand even further. Morgan claims that they are different from the old association and that a single method of rule can't work for such a diverse range of organizations. And if they're going to work together like they did in the beginning, they need a strong enemy to unify them. Tilly further reminds Ash that with the enemies in the Fertile Lands, the failure of the Alliance, and the upcoming Third Divine War, their own personal experiences will teach them far more than any explanation she could give. And at Border Town, they will see even more. They will see how non-combat witches can be just as valuable. They will witness how mortals can wield incredible power that rivals witches. And most importantly, they will see the power of unity. A wider world and a new perspective will open up for them. That's exactly why Tilly specifically chose Evie and Soft Feathers. She is certain that her brother will understand her reasons for sending those two witches. The scene transitions to Roland and Anna having fun in bed. Once the prince is done clapping her, He decides to get ready since the new witches are about to arrive. Later at dinner, the new witches join the table. The prince decides to let them have a well-deserved rest after the feast, knowing they must have had a tiring journey. He specifically instructs them not to be shy as this place is just like their home. But the two new witches still can't help but feel a little tense. Seeing this, the prince acknowledges that they might be feeling a bit shy. That's when Honey teases Lotus, revealing that she has been wearing the scarf Roland gave her last time and that she wanted to thank him. The poor girl is completely spooked by this. While all the other witches are having the time of their lives, Roland's eyes remain fixated on the two shy witches. Later, once Roland returns to his office, Honey reveals everything about them, how both Evie and Softfeathers are Bloodfang witches. It's a surprise to the prince, since he hadn't known Slumber Island had a subgroup like that. Now it makes sense why those two seemed particularly uncomfortable. Honey then explains that Evie's magic allows her to construct cages that can trap even those much stronger than her. Even someone like Ash would have a hard time if she got caught inside. As for Softfeather, she might not be a battle witch, but she is still incredibly powerful. Anything she touches becomes sticky, and once something is attached, it's impossible to break apart until the effect wears off. The prince can't help but recognize how versatile these abilities are, and he's even more surprised that Heidi Morgan actually agreed to send them. Since I don't know the name of this witch you see in front of you, I will call her Buttpuss until we find her real name. She explains that Bloodfang witches are just naturally strong. The construction of Slumber Island was partly thanks to them, and they always act high and mighty, often bullying witches who are weaker than them. If Miss Tilly wasn't strict about it, far fewer witches would have come to the island. The prince then falls into contemplation. He realizes that the witches who go to the bay don't have as much combat experience and come from many different organizations. It's no wonder something like this happens. What he doesn't understand is why Tilly sent him battle witches, perhaps to capture demons. But the months of demons are already over. Then, another thought crosses his mind. Maybe Tilly wants him to capture that devil with multiple magic stones. But that task is far too risky, even if the rewards are great. Nightingale suddenly places her hand on his forehead, checking if he's feeling unwell, given how tense he looks. He reassures her that he's fine as he is just puzzled, unable to fully grasp why Tilly would assign him such a daunting task. When they ask what kind of task he's referring to, he comes clean, revealing that he's considering using the two witches' powers to capture a devil. The next day, everyone gathers outside. Softfeather is the first to demonstrate her powers, using her magic on the stones laid out in front of her. The prince then turns to Nightingale, asking about Softfeather's level of control over her magic. Nightingale responds that Softfeather has excellent control. Her magic consumption is quite low, and she barely detected any change in her stamina. Iron Axe and the others inspect the enchanted stones, and to their surprise, the stones are completely stuck together. They can't pry them apart at all. Roland then inquires if Softfeather has ever tested how long the stickiness lasts. She explains that if she sticks something like 2 rocks together with all her power, it could probably last for decades. But that's just a prediction, as she has never actually tested it before. The prince then asks her about the largest thing she has ever stuck together. She claims it was the seawalls of Slumber Island. One day, large cracks started forming on the walls during high tide, and Lotus was absent. To prevent disaster, she filled all the cracks with her magic glue, cloth, and stones to stop the water. Otherwise, the walls wouldn't have survived the next tide. But Puss then chimes in, expressing that she plans to stay longer this time, and she's also ready to demonstrate her abilities. Roland immediately shifts his attention to Buttpuss, which causes Softfeather to pout in annoyance. But Puss then reveals that her ability is an area of control. Anyone who comes within 5 meters of her has to act according to her will. To demonstrate, she casts her magic on Iron Axe and Night Carter, and both men suddenly start dancing against their own wills. She states that she can do this about 10 times a day. The prince is quite pleased to see another unique ability. It might not be suited for ranged attacks, but in close quarters, it's incredibly effective. Also, since this ability can't be seen with the naked eye, enemies won't see it coming. As long as she can get within 5 meters, their lives will be in her hands. It's obvious that this will be incredibly useful for observing devils up close. Then, it's time for Evie to shine. She proudly boasts that she can instantly immobilize enemies and even kill them by shrinking the cage she traps them in. She can capture 2 people at a time, especially since she only has 2 hands. She further brags that even Ash wouldn't be able to escape, as long as she doesn't unclench her fists. She then throws an open challenge for any witch to step forward and try to escape her. She especially wants Maggie to try, since Maggie can transform into a huge beast. The prince finds this idea to be very good. After all, Maggie's dragon form is the same type of creature that the devils use as steeds. If they're going to capture devils, they might encounter similar enemies, so they decide to call Maggie over. And speak of the devil, Maggie appears. The prince doesn't waste any time explaining the situation. All Maggie has to do is transform into her dragon form and see if she can escape Evie's magic cage. Maggie quickly shifts into her giant form, and Evie wastes no time activating her ability. A glowing cage materializes around Maggie, trapping her. Maggie struggles with all her might, but it's clear she can't escape. Seeing this, the prince is thoroughly satisfied. Even if they face a devil riding a dragon, they'll still be able to capture it, and the cage itself is incredibly sturdy. Roland then orders Evie to release Maggie, but instead of complying, this crazy woman does the opposite. She tightens her grip on Maggie and slams her down into the ground. Everyone watching immediately panics and starts yelling at Evie to release Maggie, but Evie doesn't listen. She completely ignores them. Seeing this, Lightning gets annoyed and charges straight at the treacherous woman, but Evie just traps Lightning too. And then, with no hesitation, she throws her away. That's when Roland finally snaps. He promptly delivers a hard slap across Evie's face for the shit she's pulling. That slap is enough to snap Evie out of whatever twisted mindset she was in, and she quickly apologizes. Apparently, she was just trying to gauge the other witch's powers. She believes that people are capable of surpassing their limits when facing danger, and she just wanted to make the test results more accurate. But from what she's seen, even an evolved non-battle witch can't compete, which makes their so-called ascension completely useless. Prince, on the other hand, is totally not vibing with this lady. He can't figure out what kind of messed up upbringing she must have had that makes her think hurting others is completely normal. Roland then turns to Maggie and asks her about her well-being. Wendy sadly admits that while she's not severely injured, she ended up with some bruises. Roland gets even more ticked off hearing this, and sternly orders Evie to apologize to her. Evie doesn't respond immediately, but eventually she offers an apology to Roland. However, the prince reminds her that he doesn't want her apology to him, he wants her apology to Maggie. Hearing this, Evie looks rattled, as if Roland had asked her for something blasphemous. All she does in response is click her tongue. Seeing her messed up attitude, Roland realizes that the situation on Slumber Island is worse than he thought. Most importantly, he sees that she doesn't believe she did anything wrong. He can think of countless ways to punish her, but none of them will change her twisted views, so it's pointless. Instead, Roland tries to mess with her psychologically. He reminds her that just because she thinks she's strong doesn't mean it's her right to hurt those weaker than her. In reality, she's the weak one. Roland reminds her that support witches are more important than battle witches, and in a fight, support witches are the heart of survival. Her idea that the opposite is true is both pitiful and laughable. She won't win if she relies on her abilities alone. Evie just feels annoyed and believes that no support witch is capable enough to defeat her. But Roland makes it clear that most of the Witch Union members could do it easily, even if they've never used their abilities in combat. Yet Evie sticks to her guns, making it clear that she believes no one can defeat her. At this point, Roland decides to organize a serious fight between her and Maggie, hoping Maggie will show her that Evie has no privilege over any witch. Of course, this arrogant Evie just dismisses Maggie as a dumb pigeon. Roland makes it clear that the duel will take place tomorrow, and he wants Evie to learn that she's not as strong as she thinks she is. The next day, an extravagant breakfast is laid out in front of Evie. She had expected them to starve her so Maggie would have an upper hand, but it seems like they want her to fight fair and square. This also shows how much Roland trusts Maggie. Softfeather then reminds her that Madame Heidi Morgan had clearly told them to simply observe the situation, and they've only attracted unwanted attention by making a scene. But the arrogant Evie reminds her friend how Madame Heidi would say that battle witches who conquer territories and wield power for their ruler are more important. As for the king here, she finds him strange. It's like he actually sees all witches as equals. She also doesn't like the fact that someone like Maggie, who can barely finish her sentences, is loved by everyone, including the king. Evie also believes that Maggie is a traitor who left Slumber Island and joined these witches. She wants to show the king her true strength so that he will acknowledge her and hold her in high regard, since she is a battle witch. She wants to show him that the gap between battle and support witches can't be closed, no matter how much evolution occurs. Now, let's switch to Maggie and Lightning. Lightning is totally fired up and wants Maggie to beat the crap out of Evie. While Maggie doesn't want to hurt her fellow witch, Lightning reminds her that if she lets Evie go this time, she won't take Maggie exploring anymore, because cowards can't become explorers. This is when Nightingale yells at Lightning for calling Maggie a coward. Cowards don't fight devils, and Maggie clearly saved Nightingale's life from them. She then turns to Maggie and explains that Roland arranged this duel to make the Bloodfang witches recognize their mistake and change their attitudes. If Maggie can defeat them, she'll be helping them learn the truth. So if she's not fighting for herself, she's protecting everyone, just like when she was fighting the devils. Maggie relaxes a little and acknowledges what her senior is saying. She even breaks into a happy smile because Roland promised her unlimited ice cream and peppered steak for a week if she wins. Just another reason for her to give it her all. The time for the duel arrives and both participants stand facing each other. Before the fight begins, Evie, out of habit, throws some nasty jabs at Maggie, telling her to surrender while she still has the chance. But Maggie isn't fazed at all. As soon as the king signals the start of the duel, Evie immediately tries to retaliate. But Maggie quickly transforms into a bird and flies off, giving Evie no chance to trap her in her cage magic. After dodging left and right, Maggie seizes an opportunity. She shifts back into her human form and fires a barrage of bullets at Evie, utterly defeating her. Suddenly, the scene transitions to Evie's past. She is running alongside a red-haired girl named Annie. After running for what feels like forever, they are eventually caught by soldiers hunting witches. But before the soldiers can act, they are obliterated by another faction. The one who just brutally slaughtered them is none other than Madame Heidi and her companions. Skyfire, one of Madame Heidi's underlings, interrogates the two girls. Annie reveals that they are both witches, but 3 others got separated from them. She wants to find them. But Skyfire makes it clear that they don't have the resources to find and rescue everyone. If those who are not powerful enough to make it here, then they are no use for Bloodfang. Not to mention, those who even end up making to Bloodfang are not guaranteed to be enrolled. Later we see that only Evie ends up joining the Bloodfang group, while her friend Annie is left behind. Annie's abilities weren't impressive, and physical strength is not enough to be classified as powerful. Evie cries and begs to stay with her friend, but Madame Heidi personally addresses her concerns. She tells Evie that Bloodfang doesn't need lambs for slaughter, it needs beasts. Then, she tells her a story. The stone wolf, the mascot of Wolfheart, is the apex predator of the mountains. A stone wolf mother commonly gives birth to 3 or 4 cubs, but not all of them survive. The mother wolf kills any cubs she can't afford to feed, ensuring the survival of the strongest. She believes that this is the only way future generations can survive. She further tells Evie that to survive in this cruel world, a witch must become a beast. Only a witch as strong as them can keep her life. They continue to drill this belief into her mind. Right then, Evie wakes up from her nightmare. When she opens her eyes, she finds Nana happily introducing herself. She's the one tending to Evie's wounds under King Roland's orders. Suddenly, Nana remembers that Evie must be hungry, so she quickly leaves to get her some food. Evie moves her limbs and realizes she isn't hurt anywhere. Reflecting on the fight, she feels deeply embarrassed, losing to some stupid pigeon of all things. To her, all these witches are nothing more than untrained lambs, living only for foolish pleasure. Meanwhile, her own struggles are written in the scars that still remain on her body. She believes Tilly's witches are the same, pleasure seekers who would barely put up any real resistance against a powerful enemy. This world belongs to the strong, where survival means preying on the weak. To live, one must become a beast and act like one. She holds Madame Heidi's teachings close to her heart, and yet, she can't stop thinking about her friend Annie, who was left behind simply because she wasn't strong enough. She remembers the times they used to share food, breaking bread together. Just then, Nana returns with some freshly baked bread, and Evie promptly takes it. She then asks Nana if she was sleep-talking earlier. Nana responds positively, claiming that she kept repeating the words, "wild beast." She asks why Evie would say something like that. After all, she isn't a wild beast. To Nana, they are all just witches. And witches, in the end, are no different from humans. Sure, witches possess supernatural abilities, but according to King Roland, they aren't all that different from mortals. Later, Evie meets Roland, wanting to know what kind of weapon Maggie had used against her. That's when Roland shows her the revolver. This thing is called a gun. It uses gunpowder to propel a fatal bullet at the enemy. However, the bullets Maggie used were specially modified so they wouldn't penetrate her body. Otherwise, she would have been dead by now. He emphasizes the importance of this weapon. He shows her a bullet, not longer than a pinky finger, but manufacturing it is an incredibly complex process. This process involves hundreds of ordinary townspeople and 3 witches, all working in strict coordination to produce them. And these witches are non-combat witches, the kind Evie has always considered useless. Perhaps they can't use their abilities to directly take down an enemy, but that doesn't mean they aren't powerful. Similarly, an ordinary human would struggle to fight a wild beast with their bare hands. Yet those who have risen to the top of the world are humans, not beasts. So, instead of calling them non-combat witches, he prefers to call them support witches. Their abilities allow them to accomplish things that would otherwise require dozens of ordinary people. As a result, humanity can easily defeat beasts, and from a certain perspective, support witches might even be more valuable than combat witches. But Evie believes that if these weapons were placed in the hands of battle witches, they could be put to far greater use. To this, the prince points out that the difference wouldn't be significant, at least not significant enough to turn the tide of a war. He asks her to imagine facing 10 ordinary combatants, each wielding the same weapon as her. In that situation, her chances of winning would be slim. His lands can currently produce 7 or 8 of these guns per day, but there is only a limited number of combat witches available. Simply having weapons isn't enough. If they wish to keep using them, they must establish massive production and logistics teams. It may be a hard truth to accept, but he reminds her once again that humans surpass beasts because they use intelligence to create and harness power that previously didn't exist. And in that context, support witches are indispensable. Magic is undoubtedly one of the greatest tools, yet she is wasting her talent. At that moment, she remembers her friend, the one who wasn't a battle witch and was left behind because of it. For the first time, she questions whether support witches can actually be useful. To this, the prince admits that magic has countless uses. Its effectiveness varies, but as long as it is used correctly, it can bring about miracles. In the afternoon, the reserves of the First Army will conduct live fire gun training. He arranges for Evie to observe. If she goes, she will witness firsthand what true power is. Later, we see Wendy scolding Agatha for skipping meals while overworking. Agatha apologizes, explaining that she was so focused on making the last batch of dinitrogen that she didn't realize it was already nighttime. She partly blames Roland for inventing light bulbs. When the factory lights are on, it feels like daytime. Regardless, Wendy places a dinner box on the table and urges her to eat before it gets cold. She also tells Agatha that if she ever feels tired, she should ask Echo to sing the Song of the Springing. The melody can lift her spirits and relieve exhaustion. More than anything, Wendy reminds her that she is part of the Witch Union, and she doesn't want any of her sisters falling ill. Agatha is touched by Wendy's concern and promises to take better care of herself. As she opens the dinner box, she notices a small jar of honey, which warms her heart even more. Wendy not only made sure she ate but even remembered her love for sweets. It reminds Agatha of tequila, where they mostly survived on fruits and grains grown by support witches. Meat was rare, and seasonings, sugar, and honey were out of the question. Even if they had a witch who could control bees, she would have been sent to the battlefield rather than assigned to produce what was considered an unnecessary luxury. She is grateful that Wendy paid attention to her small preferences. Since she can't feel the cold, she has never been particularly sensitive to warmth. But in a way, it does get chilly when she's alone. Maybe living with others isn't so bad after all. Just then, Nightingale appears, teasing Agatha about her cravings for sweets. But she's also here to deliver a message. Roland wants to see her. Agatha already knows what this is about. He probably wants to lecture her about work-life balance and convince her to go home earlier. Since she already knows what he's going to say, she tells Nightingale to inform him that she doesn't want to waste his precious time. She promises to keep his concerns in mind. However, Nightingale reveals that this isn't the only reason. Roland also wants to discuss launching an attack on the devils. That gets Agatha's attention. She opposes the idea. Killing a few thousand devils won't make them throw down their weapons and flee. The war won't end that easily, and if they act too soon, the kingdom could be in ruins before they even establish what they have envisioned. But the prince clarifies her misunderstanding. He doesn't intend to destroy the devil's camp. He wants to capture some of them alive. The new witches are perfect for this task, and after Evie captures the devils, they can transport them easily using a hot air balloon. Prince then asks her few crucial questions. Can devils survive without the red mist they carry? And more importantly, would their blood still be useful for creating sigils? Typically, a canister of red mist lasts a day or so, and devils determine how much to bring based on their mission. If they are patrolling or conducting surveillance, they usually carry 3 or 4 canisters, but that is their limit. Once they leave that strange black tower, the mist gradually loses its effectiveness. Otherwise, the scholarly guild would have mass-produced sigils long ago by feeding devils and chaos beasts. The prince understands this. If they successfully bring back a live devil, he asks Agatha if she can use it to create more sigils. She confirms that she can, but she will need sufficient ingredients, an independent lab, and at least 20 mortal assistants. The success rate for creating simple sigils is around 8%. More advanced ones require specific types of stones, materials they currently lack. She then suggests that when he goes to capture the devils, he should bring both her and Anna along. She reminds him that his witch union includes multiple high-tier witches, and when combined with his unique weapons, their overall strength is comparable to an allied divine squadron. Even if they encounter the underworld ruler, Miss Anna can activate the divine sigil twice, enough to obliterate their foes. Besides, victory over the devils is her life's mission. She will not disappoint him. King Roland then asks another question. He wants to know why she reacted so strongly to the idea of attacking the devil camp. Based on what she had told him before, he assumed she would support making the devils their first target. In fact, she had previously been willing to accept casualties for a chance at capturing a chaos beast. But Agatha merely shrugs off the question, claiming she doesn't remember saying anything like that. Forcing an excuse, she abruptly leaves his office saying she's feeling sleepy. As she leaves, she recalls how Wendy once predicted that Roland would become king of Grey Castle and lead them to victory against any enemy. And now, that prediction seems to be coming true. So because of this reason, she has also started trusting his judgment more, rather than making rash decisions based on her own impulses. Meanwhile, we switch back to Evie, who is dealing with her own turmoil. After observing the soldiers at the training grounds, she has come to understand that metal bullets are far more powerful than the ones Maggie used. And the cannons? Those are even more terrifying. They make revolvers and rifles seem like mere toys. However, the soldiers tell her that the cannon she saw is actually the oldest model. Their real trump card lies with the artillery division, specifically the newly developed 152mm howitzer. And her head is still ringing from all the blasts she heard today. Softfeather has a similar reaction after witnessing the terrifying power King Roland possesses. She realizes that Madame Heidi never even considered the possibility that such power existed. Evie sinks further into depression. By now, whatever Heidi's objective was, it no longer matters. She believes that, in Roland's eyes, Tilly Wimbledon's crowd of support witches is far more important than the battle witches of Bloodfang. Evie is devastated. The power she had been so proud of all these years is nothing more than a joke. Other than Annie, she has nothing left to hold on to. She then announces to Softfeather that she does not want to go back to Bloodfang. Surprisingly, Softfeather feels the same way. Then, she notices Evie crying, which is an unusual sight, because beasts are not supposed to cry. And even if they do, it is never for themselves. Evie wonders how different things might have been if she and Annie had met the Witch Union from the very beginning. Later, they visit Roland and reveal everything about Bloodfang, how it operates and what its true nature is. Roland then asks if Tilly knows about their ways. Evie answers that they are not sure. Heidi forbade them from revealing anything about the group, and she rarely spoke to Tilly. The prince then inquires about the other witch groups on Sleeping Island. Evie explains that most of them are closer to Tilly, especially after the slumber spells were built. However, some battle witches secretly agree with Heidi's ideas. Most of them, though, do not want to deal with Ash's wrath. Roland begins to realize that Bloodfang is more problematic than he initially thought. As the daughter of Duke Morgan, Heidi could have easily provided shelter for support witches, but she never planned on taking them in. Her goal was never about compassion, unlike the Witch Union. She only wanted a hit squad. He may need to send a secret letter to Tilly to warn her about Bloodfang. Then, the prince asks why they are revealing everything about Bloodfang now, despite being forbidden from doing so. The only explanation he can think of is that they both want to abandon Bloodfang's orders. They confirm his suspicion, admitting that they wish to join the Witch Union. Roland had expected that the firearms demonstration would deal a blow to their pride, but he did not expect it to shake them so deeply. He then addresses Evie, reminding her that he cannot just forget the fact that she hurt Maggie. For now, he cannot accept them into the Witch Association. This is when Evie begins to unbutton her clothes and stands bare before the prince. She offers herself for punishment. Before Roland can react, Nightingale swiftly moves to block his vision, preventing him from seeing Evie's exposed body. She then promptly rushes to cover Evie with a blanket, but in that brief moment, Roland catches a glimpse of the permanent scars marking her back. And suddenly he understands. Evie's willingness to accept punishment without hesitation reveals just how deeply Bloodfang's ways are ingrained within her. This is not just about obedience, it is about control, submission, and a warped sense of loyalty. Roland tells her that if she truly wants to join the Witch Union, she must stop acting as though she is still part of Bloodfang. She is no longer a tool to be used or discarded. A short while later, as he grows more relaxed, he informs her that she may submit a request through Wendy. Her behavior and willingness to change will determine whether the witches are willing to accept her. But no matter what, Neverwinter will always be a home for witches. Even if she does not become part of the Witch Union, she will not be cast out. When Evie leaves, Nightingale comments on how fortunate she is. She survived while her friend Annie was not as lucky. If Bloodfang is truly the only witch organization left in Wolfheart, then witches who do not fall into their ranks likely face even worse fates. Captured by the church or aristocrats, their chances of survival would be slim. The next day, Anna arrives wearing a new uniform, looking absolutely stunning. She seeks Roland's opinion on the outfit. He has grown used to seeing her in the maid uniform, so this change is refreshing. The fabric was provided by Soraya's magic, making it both lightweight and durable. This means she can design even more outfits for Anna, an idea that excites Roland. Then, he reveals the real reason he called her over. He wants to develop a new energy source, an alternative to the steam engine. He presents her with blueprints for a new machine. It is similar to a steam engine, but instead of rotating rods, its mechanism uses paddles. A paddle steamer. It still relies on pressurized steam, but the efficiency is significantly improved. As for Anna's role in its construction, just like with the battleships, progress will depend on the first working prototype. There is no rush, though, since Wendy mentioned that they are preparing to capture some devils. And this time, Roland will not be joining them. Anna is visibly relieved. She cannot bear to watch him get injured, or worse, killed, like last time. They share some passionate moments together before she departs. Later, after Anna leaves, Nightingale appears. Roland tells her that they should practice a few more times before the mission. She must be completely familiar with the plan and everyone's role. This ambush will target small groups of devils that pursue invaders, and they must be ready to adapt if things do not go as expected. If the situation turns dire, Roland orders her to ensure that Anna returns safely, no matter what. That is precisely why he is not going with them. Otherwise, everyone would prioritize protecting him, leaving them vulnerable. Just then, they notice Barov through the window. He has returned from the capital. Since Roland wants to discuss smelting operations with him, he decides to head out to meet him. Meanwhile, in the capital, Iris, the daughter of Duke Carlin, arrives at the castle, seeking an audience with King Roland. However, the guards inform her that Roland left Prime Minister Barov in charge. But Barov himself departed for Neverwinter a few days ago. For now, the castle stands empty, except for the servants. Iris feels frustrated as she stares at the grand yet empty castle. They had rushed all the way here without stopping, only to realize that they completely missed their mark. She cannot believe that the king abandoned such an incredible city just to build his own in the western region. With no other option, she decides to return to the pier. If Roland is in the west, then that is where she must go. She is adamant about meeting him. However, her brother reminds her that there is no need to rush. They can take their time. Reluctantly, Iris agrees. She decides to find an inn for the night and leave in the morning. As for the heads and the rest of their luggage, she insists on leaving them on the boat. The last thing she wants is to smell them any longer. The next morning, when the siblings return to their boat, they are met with an unexpected sight. The ship has been burned down. Iris immediately seeks out a dock worker, demanding to know why their ship was set ablaze. The worker promptly explains the situation. Some fool left corpses on board, and the smell attracted burglars. He reminds them that people in this city are extremely sensitive about dead bodies. After all, it was corpses planted by the church that caused the terrible plague just a year ago. Fire, he says, is the safest and most effective way to eliminate the threat. To make matters worse, the captain of the ship has been arrested for questioning. Hearing this string of bad news, Iris's frustration grows. This trip was supposed to be about pledging their loyalty, but now it feels like everything is falling apart. Meanwhile, at the border town, the witches gather to prepare for their devil heist. They engage in target practice, ensuring their precision and control are perfect for the upcoming battle. Once training is complete, they celebrate their efforts, spirits high. However, Evie remains uncertain. She is still unsure if these witches are truly capable of capturing devils alongside her. Roland had told her that they were all support witches who had contributed greatly to the kingdom. But standing here now, she sees something different. These are not support witches, they are textbook battle witches. And then there is Nightingale. The moment she slips into her mist, the entire world becomes hers. She moves like a ghost, phasing through reality itself. Nothing can stop her. A goddess of death who can kill in silence. Any enemy would be struck with dread upon realizing she was coming for them. But Evie knows that even this terrifying display is nothing compared to the unimaginable existence of devils. After all, they destroyed the Witch Empire centuries ago. And now, they lurk near the western region, closer than ever before. Their plan was crafted by a 400-year-old witch who intends to study the monsters. According to their strategy, Anna is their true trump card. But is she really powerful enough to wipe out pursuing devils in an instant? Now, it is finally Anna's turn. Her task is to eliminate all the balloons floating in the sky. She activates her sigil and unleashes her power. In an instant, every balloon is obliterated at once. The sheer force of her attack is so overwhelming that even Agatha is in awe. It feels like divine punishment itself, a true hidden weapon at their disposal. Witnessing this power, even Evie is left speechless. Compared to Anna, the beasts that Bloodfang prided themselves on are no different from sheep. Roland then questions Nightingale about what she saw in Anna's attack. In response, she explains that she saw those flashes of lightning, which were created with magic. She also saw the violent swirl of magic in the mist. But its color was different from any other magic she had seen before. And the color was very peculiar. It was black, or rather it was colorless light. It resembled the void created by the stones of divine punishment. In her mist vision, the gleaming power of sigils appeared both colorless and black. Roland then asks Agatha about the amount of research involved in studying sigils. Agatha explains that there wasn't much, as she had already told him everything they had learned. After all, only the top witches could activate sigils, and their powers couldn't be wasted on testing. He then shares a hunch. The stones of divine judgment don't actually negate magic. Instead, they might be vessels of highly concentrated magic, so much so that their magic levels are so high, they cause other magic around them to stop working. Agatha then remembers that the disciples at the Scholarly Guild, who were in charge of observing magic, had clearly stated that surrounding magic stones would stop working when sigils were active near them. The prince, in response, argues that her observation could have been obstructed by the divine sigil's blinding surge of energy, like how a shadow disappears in bright light. But in Nightingale's mist world, only magic has color. Even if she stares directly at the sun, it wouldn't appear in her vision, which could explain why past witches never discovered this phenomenon. With this explanation, Agatha figures that divine sigils remain unaffected by the stones of divine punishment because their magic concentration is even higher. She then wonders if chaos beasts absorb magic from the stones to focus their direction. The prince somewhat agrees, but Agatha still isn't sure. If the lightless void is a result of an incredibly high magic concentration, then why doesn't it happen to witches? For example, Anna has activated the divine sigil twice, meaning her magic levels should be higher than a stone's. But her black fire is still affected by the stone's negation, and she herself doesn't negate magic. That doesn't make sense. She also notes another strange thing. Why do magic stones need to be charged with magic to activate? She remembers her teacher once believed that only life could be a vessel for magic. Lifeless materials were abandoned by magic, and the properties of witch and devil blood were proof of that. The prince doesn't mind proving this hypothesis wrong, but he points out that magic stones aren't much different from regular gemstones, unless they're infused with external magic or formed into a sigil. There has to be a connection within all this, something he might be overlooking. For now, Agatha decides to set this mystery aside. They may figure it out as they create more sigils in the future. Right now, they need to focus on Operation Melting Point, the mission to capture the devils. The time for the mission finally arrives, and before Anna departs, she and Prince Roland share a romantic moment together. But suddenly, Lightning and Maggie butt in, completely ruining the sweet time the couple was having. All because they want Roland's attention too. Seeing this, Agatha can't help but notice how this is just a simple devil hunt. Yet Prince Roland seems so deeply caring for Anna and the others. Anyhow, the ship finally sets sail. And as the prince waves them off, Nightingale suddenly pops out of her mist, steals a quick smooch of her own, and vanishes, promising that she'll be back soon enough. With that, the ship leaves, and King Roland is left hoping everything goes well. For this operation, the team has hot air balloons along with 2 fully equipped ships carrying soldiers as a safety measure. The steamboat is much slower than the hot air balloons, so they need about 2 days just to reach the end of the Redwater River. They only have 2 ships with them, both stacked with the First Army's best veterans, with Captain Brian leading the charge. One of the ships will remain on standby near the beach, about 2 to 3 miles away from the operation site. They won't participate directly in the hunt unless something goes wrong and suppression is needed. The hot air balloon doesn't have to fly very high this time. As long as they get around the snowy mountain, Sylvie should be able to spot the tower's eye monster. According to Agatha, anyone who notices the eye monster will immediately be located by the devils. As they lower their balloon's altitude, Lightning asks Sylvie if she can see anything. Sylvie replies that she needs to get closer, otherwise she won't last for very long. Wendy promptly uses her wind magic to push the balloon a little lower, and once the balloon is right over the red mist, Sylvie activates her abilities again. Almost instantly, she feels as if countless monsters are staring back at her, shocking the hell out of her. She quickly reports that she has managed to grab their attention. The devils are coming. Without hesitation, Sylvie hops out of the balloon and onto Maggie's back. Meanwhile, Lightning makes sure to carry Wendy as they head toward the ambush spot, leaving the balloon deserted in the air. Sylvie spots 5 silhouettes, 4 flying beasts, and about the 5th one, she's not sure what it is. If there are 5 of them, it's more than what Agatha had predicted, but it's still doable. They can carry out the mission. But then, Sylvie notices something strange. These devils look different from the regular ones they've seen before. This is unexpected. While they had considered the possibility of new developments, they're not sure if they should continue or abort the mission. Once they reach the forest, Lightning orders them to head to the rendezvous point while she goes to destroy the balloon. But just as Lightning is about to fly off, Sylvie suddenly calls out for her to stop. But Maggie quickly reminds Sylvie that it was Roland who told them to destroy the balloon if enemies chased after it. Wendy also agrees that they should regroup with the First Army to minimize unnecessary risks. However, Sylvie urgently reports that some of these devils don't look the same. They aren't just fighting against normal devils. She wants to warn everyone before they engage. Meanwhile, Lightning zooms through the sky and finally reaches the balloon, which is being pursued by the devils. Without wasting time, she detonates the bomb and dashes away. The explosion goes off, taking down one of the devils while the others are caught in the blast, tasting fire. Feeling proud of herself, Lightning mocks the feeble monsters for getting tricked so easily. Then, picking up speed again, she dashes off toward her next goal, luring them into Miss Leaf's forest. She's confident that the thick overgrowth of vines and thorns will become their worst nightmare. But judging by how these guys look like Dark Souls monsters, this devil hunt probably won't be as easy as they thought. Meanwhile, Sylvie reports to everyone about the strange devils she just saw. It seems like Agatha already knows about them. She explains that while those robed devils are fearsome and incredibly terrifying to mortals, witches don't need to fear them, so long as they avoid eye contact. Their eyes are hidden beneath scars on their faces that resemble scorch marks. Sylvie then brings up the armored devil, the one flying without the help of a dragon monster. She wonders if it could be an underworld ruler. Agatha quickly assures her that it's not. If her memory serves her right, she believes it's most likely a high-tier devil. The Alliance knows very little about them, but she does know that they have multiple abilities. They are humanoid but much larger. High-tier devils are incredibly powerful, both in strength and magic. It's been rumored that only witches stronger than Transcendents can rival them. Hearing this, Sylvie panics again as they don't have anyone stronger than a Transcendent. She immediately decides to tell Leaf to stop everything and retreat to the First Army. Agatha then explains that the armored devil can fly because it has a flight stone. If the team only consisted of Lightning and Maggie, they might be able to escape. But the rest of them wouldn't survive once they left Leaf's protection. She has never seen a high-tier devil in person before, but she's heard from Lady Alice that total concentration is necessary when fighting them. Even a tiny mistake could cost them their lives. So Agatha directly calls the others and announces that they are changing the operation. She orders all witches to switch to Plan B, abandon the capture, and use the divine sigil to wipe out all enemies. Nightingale must keep an eye on the armored devil, and Anna must strike the moment an opportunity appears, no hesitation allowed. Sylvie, however, can't help but have doubts. Can they really defeat something like that? Agatha assures her that high-tier devils rarely appear alone, and if it has 2 fearsome devils as support, they may win. Turning their backs and running would only lead to death. Full retaliation was their only option. Lightning reports that the enemies have arrived. Sylvie follows up, confirming that the armored devil hasn't landed yet. It's still chasing after Lightning. Meanwhile, the rest of the devils have parked their mounts outside the forest and are now giving chase as well. That's when Sylvie notices something strange. There are only 4 devils. One is missing. Agatha and Maggie decide to stick to the plan and eliminate the devil's steeds first. Maggie quickly lures the dumb monsters in with her charm, and Agatha ambushes them. Together, they take down 2 of the creatures in an instant. Only 1 flying monster remains. Agatha wastes no time, using her ice magic to freeze it mid-air. Maggie follows up with a powerful strike, shattering the frozen beast into pieces. Meanwhile, we switch to Nightingale and Anna. Hearing about the change in plans, Nightingale feels disappointed. Evie's ability is no longer needed, which makes her a little sad. Now, it's her job to create an opening for Anna to activate the divine sigil and obliterate the enemies. She recalls Roland's words, his wish for her to protect Anna at all costs. Stealing her resolve, she prepares to fulfill her promise to the king. Just then, Sister Leaf reports that the enemies are approaching. Nightingale springs into action. Following the movement, she spots the monsters. Among them is one normal devil, but two others look different. She senses a stronger magic presence in them. Maybe these are the high-tier devils Agatha warned them about. But the strongest one, the real threat, isn't among them. She looks up. Sure enough, that bastard is in the sky, watching everything from above. Well, she'll deal with that later. First, they need to take down the fearsome devils on the ground. These are the ones that terrorize their victims through sheer presence alone. With precise aim, she takes down one of them. Sister Leaf doesn't hesitate and eliminates the second. Then, working together, Anna and Nightingale finish off the remaining devils. Now only the high-tier devil remains. Lightning suddenly yells for them to watch out. The monster has just thrown a giant black sword straight at them. Nightingale immediately activates her mist magic to evade, but it doesn't work. Her magic is nullified in an instant. This confirms it, the high-tier devil has the ability to disrupt magic. Before they can react, he throws another sword. Anna steps forward. With everything she's got, she stops the blade, barely. But the effort drains her completely, leaving her exhausted. Then, something even stranger happens. A blinding light fills the air. Lightning and the others spot the source. It's coming from the devil. For a brief moment, Nightingale wonders if he's using the divine sigil. But no, this is his own ability. The bastard comes crashing down, unleashing a terrifying force. The shockwave sends lightning tumbling through the air. Leaf also gets caught in the devastating blast. Then, the devil turns his attention to Nightingale and attacks. Her mist begins to crack. Sister Leaf, already weakened from the previous attack, takes another hit. Evie and Sister Leaf lose their balance. They fall from their safe position. Poor Leaf even coughs up a copious amount of blood after getting severely injured. The high-tier devil is standing right in front of Anna and Sister Leaf, so Nightingale quickly hops out of her hiding spot and starts throwing a barrage of bullets. But those bullets are useless against the devil's sturdy armor, and he just keeps blocking them with his sword. Since she can't shoot through, she decides to go for a direct stab to the head, aiming to fracture its mist canisters. But the bastard quickly swings his giant sword, refusing to let Nightingale get any closer. The back and forth continues until Nightingale finally gets an opening. She strikes the bastard's head, only for her knife to shatter into pieces on impact. The bastard actually has a magic barrier surrounding its body. Then the bastard starts charging energy in his palm, preparing to throw it at Nightingale. The energy he exudes completely nullifies her magic, and before she can react, he strikes her hard in the stomach with his sword. That single hit nearly obliterates one of her sides. The bastard raises his sword in the air, ready to finish her off. But before he can, Evie uses her magic and completely traps him. But it's clear Evie is struggling. The bastard is just too powerful, and he's already resisting. Nightingale tells her to just slam him into the ground, and before the bastard can break free, Anna steps in, prepared to unleash the power of the sigil. That terrifying force is enough to leave the monster in shambles. He can't silence abilities anymore, so Nightingale seizes the chance, grabs Evie, and they quickly escape. Meanwhile, Anna gives it everything she's got, unleashing her full power against the bastard. Eventually, she's completely exhausted. The worst part is that even though the devil is brutally wounded, he's still standing. He just tanked the sigil's attack and braved through it. Nightingale starts feeling the toll of the battle. Anna is out of commission. Leaf is drained, and lightning is nowhere to be seen. That's when Evie steps forward, dagger in hand, ready to fight the monster. Her powers are almost depleted, but she's still a combat witch. Just then, Agatha and Maggie arrive. Maggie swoops in, crashing right onto the bastard. But the damn thing just nullifies Maggie's magic and tosses her away like a rag doll. Seeing this, Agatha realizes it's a magic slayer. She then quickly uses her ice magic, freezing the bastard's feet and rendering him immobile. Nightingale and Maggie quickly pull out their revolvers and start firing. But once again, the monster counters with another magic attack, sending Agatha staggering. He finally breaks free from the ice that was restraining him. But before he can do anything else, Sister Leaf steps up. She uses the sigil herself and launches a devastating attack that completely stuns the monster. The devil is utterly exhausted. Maggie takes the opportunity to land on top of the bastard again. This time, he stays down for the count. Agatha is absolutely blown away that they actually managed to defeat this monster. Meanwhile, Nightingale is just annoyed that they all nearly got wrecked by a single devil, and she's sure that Roland is going to be utterly disappointed when he hears about all of this. But Agatha reminds her that this isn't just any typical victory, because the foe they were facing was a magic slayer. She explains that even a group of high-tier witches might be able to defeat a high-tier devil, but there's no chance of winning against a magic slayer. These enemies possess many abilities, but they are different from witches since their powers are not awakened. Someone once witnessed the same high-tier devil attacking Tequila over the course of many years. Over time, it gained 2 new types of magic, and its power increased so much that it could produce the same effect as the Stones of Divine Judgment. That magic nullifying ability is technically termed disrupting, and it has a chance of breaking through the stones, protections, and any magical attack against it will be weakened. A magic slayer can scatter magical effects and stop abilities from activating, making them formidable enemies for witches. Take Anna, for example. If a magic slayer had her ability, it would be able to use black fire while disrupting their magic at the same time. The black fire would suppress other magic and disable it, unless they were fighting another magic slayer. This is part of the reason why the Divine Sigil didn't kill this devil on the first try. Although this is the first time they've encountered such a battle, the Alliance has never recorded any instances of using the Divine Sigil against magic slayers either. However, when the Alliance's transcendent witches equipped the Stones of Divine Judgment, they gleamed radiantly on the battlefield, and devils everywhere melted like snow. The transcendent witches were like the heart of the sun, and anyone who personally witnessed Lady Alice's power was overwhelmed by her strength. Yet no Alliance member has ever managed to defeat a magic slayer. And according to Agatha's knowledge, witches and devils are fundamentally different. That's when Maggie notices something surprising in the devil's corpse. It's actually a box. When she opens it, she finds a bunch of magic stones inside. Agatha is shocked to see them. She can't really tell what type they are, but judging from their brilliance, they were made from top-quality stones of divine judgment. Leaf is happy to see that their devil hunt wasn't all in vain. They at least got their hands on some valuable loot. Maggie then decides to investigate the other corpses to see if they contain more stones. Wendy arrives and is concerned to see Anna knocked out. Leaf assures her that she's just unconscious from magic depletion. Lightning also returns, apologizing for her absence. When the devil swung its sword, she fell from the sky. But Nightingale is just happy that she's safe and gives her a little pat. Brian also joins the scene, and is stunned at the sight of the terrifying devil corpses. Nightingale then orders Brian to have his soldiers sweep the forest and bring back all the corpses, including every piece of armor, clothing, and weapon they can find. While their plan to capture a live devil has failed, the least they can do is gather the remains and bring them to Roland. Speaking of live devils, Lightning remembers the one that got caught in the explosion and fell into the water. If devils can swim, then it must still be alive. Eventually, they manage to find a living one. All the human soldiers eye the creature closely, as they have never seen anything like it before. Nightingale, on the other hand, meets Agatha outside and expresses her relief at capturing a live devil in such an unexpected way. They were incredibly lucky. Agatha is just glad that they suffered no casualties, but she is disappointed in herself for underestimating the enemy during this operation. Nightingale reassures her, saying the unexpected presence of that high-tier devil wasn't her fault. No one could have predicted it would appear in a place like this. But Agatha states that this is what concerns her the most. High-tier devils typically hide behind large armies, and they never act alone. There weren't many of them around either. She had thought they would only see one when the Red Moon arrived, but after seeing these magic stones, she isn't so sure anymore. The stones they retrieved were of such high quality. The Alliance has killed thousands of fearsome devils. And if magic stones were so easy to obtain, the Scholarly Guild wouldn't have such trouble finding chaos beasts to cultivate stones. So why did these devils they just hunted carry so many high-quality stones? Could it be that they never stopped magic stone production in the past 4 centuries? She is also uncertain about the lifespan, growth cycle, and reproduction of devils, so she has no clue how they might have developed over the years. If the enemy is gathering numerous stones, does that mean they have more high-tier devils? She hopes they find the answer before it's too late. The scene transitions to Iris, who has finally made it to Neverwinter City, or rather, Border Town, where she is ready to meet King Roland. After seeing how massive the city is and how bustling the streets are, she can't help but marvel at how Roland united the western region into one city. The growth in population and commerce has even surpassed the former capital. She vividly recalls how the fourth prince was notorious for his scandals and neglect of studies. She then instructs her brother Carl to send a message to Roland announcing their arrival. She specifically tells him not to mention her as his sister. He will be representing and handling the meeting. Soon enough, Roland receives Carl's message and learns that the northern region has surrendered. Carl Candle, representing the northern region as Duke Carlin's son, has come to deliver the news. Later, Roland meets Carl and Iris. Carl speaks on behalf of his house, bringing good news. Holmes and Lista have been dealt with because they were treacherously supporting Timothy. Meanwhile, Roland's eyes remain fixed on Iris, while she is Carl's supposed assistant, but something about her presence feels more commanding than Carl's. Carl, on the other hand, continues that they hadn't expected Roland to return to the western region so soon. They had wanted to present the severed heads of Holmes and Lista as evidence, but the heads rotted away during the trip. Roland is surprised that Duke Carlin killed the 2 dukes outright. This makes him believe that Carlin's loyalty is stronger than he initially thought. If Carlin is sending the heads of 2 dukes as a pledge, it must mean he is struggling to gain the support of northern aristocrats again. At the very least, the possibility of rebellion in the northern region has greatly diminished, so Roland is somewhat relieved to hear this. Baroff then fills Roland in that the Stallion Holmes and Snowfox Lista families are founding families of the northern region, even more famous than the 5 great families of the Western region. However, the Candle family is not well known, and if he remembers correctly, they only appeared within the past 50 years. To think that Timothy would choose Carlin Candle as the Northern region's ruler is shocking. Even if it was to keep the 2 powerful families in check, it must have been difficult for Carlin, and the other families likely weren't happy about it either. That means it's unlikely Carl is lying. This concerns the pride of aristocrats. Barov is certain that if Roland accepts their loyalty, even if they are lying, the Northern region will fight among themselves first. Roland finally comes to terms. First, he expresses his thanks to Duke Carlin. Protecting the royal castle's pride is the responsibility of every aristocrat, and Carlin Candle did an excellent job. Second, the 2 dukes got what was coming to them, and the kingdom will not pursue Duke Carlin for this matter. Carl is pleased to hear this. The Candle family is more than ready to seize this opportunity to serve King Roland. Roland reminds them that Duke Carlin will have to abide by Grey Castle's new laws, which Carl is unaware of, so the king begins to elaborate. The new order dictates the dissolution of all aristocratic positions, and the class system will cease to exist. In other words, Grey Castle will have only one ruler, the king. Before Carl can panic, Roland reassures him that aristocrats will remain aristocrats. Their privileged lives will not be disrupted, and they will even have opportunities to reach new heights. These laws have already been enacted in Longsong Fortress, and the book that Barov hands them contains a detailed record of these changes. The book also includes real-life stories and examples to make the information more comprehensible. While it may seem that the aristocrats are losing privileges, in reality, they are being freed from the limitations of their territories. Instead of being confined to their lands, they will have the opportunity to operate across the entire kingdom, or even the whole continent. Roland assures them that everything will be fine and that they can relay this to Duke Carlin later. In the meantime, they are welcome to stay in Neverwinter City and enjoy its unique scenery. Roland is confident that Carl will grow to like this place. Carl, caught off guard by this out-of-syllabus contents, for which he was not prepared to respond. So he glances at his sister, silently seeking support. Eventually, his sister discreetly pats his back, offering him some reassurance. Gathering himself, Carl expresses interest in seeing the various inventions that King Roland has developed so far. After this exhausting meeting, Roland reflects on the situation. He recognizes Duke Carlin's intelligence in sending his own son as a messenger. Not wanting to waste this opportunity, Roland resolves to make the most of it. Suddenly, he notices Lightning and Maggie outside the castle window, signaling their return from an expedition. As usual, they eagerly jump toward Roland upon seeing him. Not long after, he is reunited with Anna, and the two share a passionate embrace. Meanwhile, Nightingale sighs from a distance, reminding Roland that it's unsafe for him to be out here. Roland dismisses her concerns with a reassuring smile and gives her a hug, which causes her to blush. Soon the other witches disembark from the ship, looking forward to their own warm reunions. Agatha and Evie observe from the sidelines, smiling at the scene. Later, Roland listens to the full report on the devil hunt. Agatha explains that out of the 5 devils they encountered, the magic slayer was melted by the divine sigil, and another was shredded by Anna. One of the devils had used 2 out of the 3 canisters of red mist it carried. This means the remaining canister will only last until tomorrow night at most. If they are to conduct any further experiments involving sigils, they must finish by tomorrow noon. Melting the sigil's vessel will take at least half a day, and Agatha anticipates multiple failures in the process. Roland reminds them that red mist is fatal to witches, and asks how they managed to replace the canisters for the captured devil. Agatha explains that she had mortal assistants handle the connections for her. She also brought back the depleted canisters, believing they might be useful later. Turning to Buttpuss, Roland asks if she can control the devil's mind and make it use magic. Buttpuss replies that she doesn't need to control every movement. She can issue a command that the devil will be compelled to follow. With this in mind, Roland instructs Nana to reconnect the devil's severed limbs. Though the task is unsettling, Nana has no reason to refuse and proceeds with the healing. Once the devil is fully restored, Buttpuss casts her magic, bringing it under her control before it can resist. To test its strength, Roland orders the devil to throw a spear. Buttpuss issues the command, and the devil throws a wooden stick with such force that it shatters armor upon impact. Roland and the others are astounded. There is no doubt that the devils possess tremendous throwing strength. If the spear had been metal-tipped, it would have been even more destructive. However, based on their equipment, the devils seem less proficient with metalworking than humans. Even the high-tier devil's armor is not purely metallic. This may be because smelting requires high heat, which red mist does not seem to tolerate well. Roland then tests rapid throwing, observing the devil's endurance. Eventually, the creature reaches its limit. Buttpuss explains that the devil cannot continue due to the side effects of its equipped magic stones. With this data in mind, Roland begins evaluating the enemy's overall combat strength. The strongest infantry devils have attack power comparable to gunpowder muskets. However, bolt-action rifles can easily pierce their steel plates. The lower-ranked devils, on the other hand, are no stronger than his standard weapons. This means that when humanity and the devils eventually clash, Roland's army will hold the advantage. Agatha then elaborates that, back then, the population of mortals in the fertile lands was hundreds of times more than Grey Castle's. And it was the same with witches. If everyone had a rifle back then, she's sure that defeating the devils wouldn't have been a problem. Roland then decides to halt their experiments for now, planning to conduct the durability test tomorrow. He wants to test the endurance of each body part against rifle bullets, chemicals, berserker pills, and dream water. He also needs Lucia to see what she can extract from the red mist. It's a shame they can't keep devils alive for long. Otherwise, with Nana's healing abilities, they would only need a small number of devils to gather enough data. Agatha also needs 2 witches to assist her in making sigils. She requests that the materials be prepared beforehand since, once the devils die, their blood won't last very long. They'll also need to start dissolving the stones of divine judgment while the devils are still alive. Speaking of sigils, Roland suddenly remembers that they haven't decided what type to make yet. So, he decides to spend tonight reading the Magic Stone Encyclopedia, and will let Agatha know tomorrow which kind of sigil he wants. We then switch back to Iris, where her brother has just come out of the shower and insists she take a bath while the water is still hot. She asks him how the water system works here. Carl explains that he's heard the water in the pipes flows from that big metal tower, though he still doesn't know how they even managed to raise the water that high. Iris is totally out of the loop on how everything operates here. She looks outside and notices how all the building windows are glowing with light. There's a common saying among merchants that man-made light after dark represents wealth. She had thought that brightness at night could only be seen in pubs and theaters, but now she understands what it truly means. Under the lights, every factory in the city is producing all kinds of goods, what they call industrial products. She also can't forget the steam engine she had seen. A rough lump of metal is smoothed by spinning wheels and shaped by rotating drills, turning into shining mechanical parts among mounds of grease and scraps. It's an entirely new kind of beauty. The steam engine is a beauty far beyond the brilliance of a gemstone or an intricate dress. She is desperate to figure out how in the hell Roland Wimbledon acquired all of this alien knowledge. She then leans back and questions her brother about the new law Roland has created. She wants his take on it. Carl isn't sure how to respond, but he plans to write a letter to their father tomorrow about it. Still, he fears their father might not accept the terms. He read the booklet His Majesty Roland gave him, and even if he disregards whether the examples in it are legitimate or not, he argues that the highest-ranking example mentioned was merely the son of a lord. Yet, under the new laws, that man has become something like a duke without a territory. And that man we are talking about is Ambassador Petrov. If Carl is being honest, he would probably do the same as His Majesty Roland if he were in his shoes. But he worries because their father is the legitimate ruler of the entire northern region. He is the Duke of Evernight City, holding far more power than the honeysuckle heir. If he agrees to Roland's demands, he would essentially be giving up his territory. Instead of a promotion, it feels more like a steep demotion. Well, his sister kind of agrees with his judgment, but she reminds him of one crucial thing her brother didn't take into account: the question of whether they can maintain their power. She points out that the only reason they distribute land to their knights and personnel is to preserve their loyalty to the Candle family and attract newcomers to pledge their service. And if their father had owned the entire northern region outright, the knights would have left long ago. Without property, the knights would look elsewhere, and the lower lords would do the same. In the end, the entire northern region would belong solely to the Candle family. Carl knows all this too well, and this is the same reason he isn't sure if having all of the cities belong to just one family is even feasible. In his view, the northern region is massive, and their family simply can't handle governing it alone. Not to mention, collecting taxes and harvests is already annoying enough. They can't expect the peasants to just pay up on their own. But his sister reminds him that they've been expanding their vassals precisely to protect their land. They've been following this approach because their military and governing abilities are limited. And that's exactly why Roland wants to establish a unified system. With how fast everything is changing, no army can gather the strength to defeat Roland, and no one on the entire continent can oppose him. But Carl reminds her that Roland also believes a strong, centralized government can manage an entire continent. So distributing land to lords isn't necessary. His sister, however, counters by saying that Roland himself believes that this shift is inevitable. A well-equipped centralized government will inevitably replace the feudal system because it can utilize the kingdom's resources far more efficiently. He wants to use the potential of all citizens to make production explode, believing that production is the key factor that decides the fate of a superpower. But to Carl, all of this sounds ridiculous. He doesn't believe Roland has nearly enough people to collect taxes and run everything. He will eventually have to rely on elites anyway. And even if those people have to pay up taxes at the end of the day, then what difference will it make for them? The peasants don't care who their king is. Iris responds that she's just as curious as her brother about everything he's mentioned. But she's certain that anyone capable of writing a booklet like that is definitely prepared to make it a reality. She plans to visit Roland again, but this time, she'll be the one leading the conversation. Carl, however, is frustrated to hear this. He's convinced that their father will never accept these terms. The next day arrives, and we see His Majesty Roland reviewing all the records from the experiments they ran on the devils. While firearms and swords can be fatal to devils, poison doesn't affect them much. It's likely because their biology is fundamentally different from that of humans. He also tested dream water and berserker pills, but the results were the same. the devil was completely unaffected. The former couldn't tranquilize them, and the latter didn't induce any berserk reaction. Furthermore, once the red mist was dissected, it broke down into various types of gases and liquids. According to Kyle, some of it was flammable and smelled absolutely gut-wrenching, while another part was nitrogen. The rest was still unclear. However, those components weren't necessary for the devil's survival. The key lies in the mist's enchantment and understanding why the red mist expires. Also, when the temperature rises to 300 degrees, the red mist starts to separate rapidly. At 800 degrees, it even begins to burn. It seems that fire is a decent weapon against devils, on top of traditional firearms. Just then, an officer reports to Roland that the Northern Region's ambassador wishes to see him. Roland is a bit surprised that they're ready to talk after just a day, but he's prepared to meet them. If they don't recognize his law, he's already planning to force them to stay. Later, Iris finally introduces herself as Iris Candle, the Duke of Evernight's eldest daughter and Carl's sister. She apologizes for not introducing herself previously, explaining that her brother probably forgot to do so. Roland immediately figures that she must be the real ambassador, and Iris doesn't hesitate to admit it, further claiming that her father has given her full authority over this trip, along with his official approval seal. The prince is quite intrigued to finally meet her. In this age, it's incredibly rare for a woman to be an ambassador, let alone someone so young and attractive. Given her impeccable etiquette, he can tell that this isn't the first time she has met someone of higher authority. He also realizes that she hid her identity to avoid attention during negotiations. It wasn't really deception, more like a playful tactic often used by elites. Since she is here on behalf of her father, the prince finally asks if she has made up her mind. Before giving a direct answer, she first wants to ask a few questions and clarify some things. She recalls that he mentioned how the aristocratic system would be eliminated due to the growth of central power. But without the elite's help, she wants to know how he plans to ensure that the kingdom will still be managed efficiently. Majesty Roland is intrigued by her willingness to debate, and her question is an interesting one. He's more than ready to respond. So he tells her that he will ensure the kingdom is managed efficiently through the power of the people and the development of technology. She then follows up with another question, inquiring if he is talking about normal citizens. He confirms that he is indeed talking about citizens. Essentially, the city hall will hire, train, and equip a governing team. Their qualifications won't be based on wealth or status, because it doesn't matter whether they were aristocrats or not. She then challenges him again. How will he prevent governing officers from neglecting their duties when stationed far from the capital? Once Grey Castle is fully unified, how will commerce be regulated across different regions? And can high production really be a standard to measure the efficiency of legislation? Roland smirks and elaborates on everything. Once he's done explaining, she appreciates his answers. She hadn't expected him to be so thorough. She's also impressed that the rulebook he wrote doesn't lack context either. Once again, Roland finds himself fascinated by how sharp she is. While he isn't the most well-versed in politics, he feels that's the most he can tell her on the subject. She then moves on to another topic. She wants steam engine equipment to be produced in the northern region. But the prince reminds her that he doesn't have enough personnel for that. Most importantly, replicating the technology would be difficult since the process requires the input of witches. After discussing all these matters, she is still curious about one particular thing. She doesn't quite understand why he is rushing to reunite Grey Castle, especially when he could just wait 10 years or so and easily conquer any region. In order to answer her question, Roland invites Iris to follow him. He assures her that she will understand soon enough. Eventually, he takes her to the experimental lab, where the devil lies restrained on a table. He explains to her that the foreign creature before her is a devil. They originate from beyond the northern mountains, and they pose the greatest threat humanity has ever faced. The war between humans and devils isn't about wealth or territory. It's a battle for survival. The losing side will be completely wiped out. This truth has been buried and censored by the church for centuries. In reality, this war stretches back millennia and was once known as the Divine War. Seeing the undeniable evidence before her, Iris is forced to acknowledge his words. Roland suggests continuing the discussion at the guest house. With that, they both leave the lab, leaving Agatha behind to continue her experiments. Not long after, Anna and Nana arrive. They are here to assist Agatha in accelerating the process of creating sigils. Their goal is to craft 4 listening sigils, 1 screeching sigil, and 1 observing sigil. Agatha recalls how, back in the days of the Scholarly Guild, it would have been considered a complete waste to use high-quality stones of divine judgment from magic slayers to create something as basic as screeching and observing sigils. But with Roland's powerful artillery, combat sigils are no longer as essential as they once were. As Agatha continues her work, Anna asks if the quality of a sigil depends on the ingredients used. Agatha confirms that it does. The primary determining factors are the stone of divine judgment and magic-infused blood. The Scholarly Guild once believed that magic alters the body in every aspect, and a high-tier witch's body contains far more magic than that of a normal witch. This difference becomes even more pronounced with those who surpass the transcendent level. To forge an excellent sigil, one requires the blood of powerful devils and the highest quality stones of divine judgment. For example, Lady Alice's sigil of divine judgment was created on the battlefield, using the blood of a dying magic slayer. Hearing this, Anna wonders if the same result can be achieved by combining witch blood with the stones instead. Agatha responds with no. The stones do not melt like wax, and the reaction is not as strong. When mixed with witch blood, the liquid becomes watery and clear. However, when mixed with devil blood, the liquid hardens like rock. Since the process of crafting a sigil is similar to smelting metal, the magic stone must be placed before the liquid solidifies. At the same time, they must complete a key step, connecting the magic veins. The veins are similar to those found in plants. The scholarly guild believed that only living beings could harness magic. Without this crucial step, the magic stone remains nothing more than an isolated object, incapable of channeling true power. Anna hesitates for a moment before asking, does this mean that devil blood can grant ordinary elements life? Agatha does not hesitate to reveal the harsh truth. Not only do they require devils, but they also require witches. Of course, this revelation shocks both Anna and Nana. Agatha further continues to reveal that the scholarly guild discovered this secret by accident. When witch blood is mixed with devil blood, a unique effect occurs. Essentially, a stone of divine judgment will melt and maintain a state of life, just like a plant. In this state, it can retain the magic flowing through its veins without losing it. Agatha doesn't know how to describe it, but she's sure Anna will understand once she sees it. So, she cuts her palm to draw blood, and after acquiring enough blood, she tells Nana to heal her wound. Anna, on the other hand, is tasked with placing the magic stone in the cavity according to the notes. The reason Agatha chose these two for assistance is obvious. While Nana can help her through the pain, Anna is the most educated witch in the Union, making her perfect for inheriting this practice. If King Roland hadn't given Agatha hope of defeating the devils, she would have buried the method of creating sigils forever. Mixing witch and devil blood was a truth even the Alliance found difficult to accept. That controversy was incredibly detrimental to the Divine War. Consequently, the crafting process was the scholarly guild's closely guarded secret, and that's exactly why she doesn't want Roland to observe it. The next process involves pouring the blood. Afterward, Agatha works her magic, and once the blood and stone mix together, it feels like the fluid is coming alive, a sign that their experiment is succeeding. Next, they'll have to cut it open and seal it again with a sheet of silver. The last step differs with each type of sigil. For example, the screeching sigil can't be cut, so it must be used as a whole. Anna is worried about what happens if the process fails. Agatha reassures her that failure is always a possibility. However, the solution is quite simple. They just need to extract the magic stone and start over. The problem is that it's going to consume more blood. This is why devil blood was more valuable than witches in tequila. It doesn't really matter if witch blood is spilled during experimentation, but wasting devil blood was punishable. Now it's time for the next sigil, and this time, Anna volunteers to donate her blood. She reminds Agatha that while Nana can heal cuts, she can't replenish blood. Roland also warned that blood loss can cause nausea and even fainting, so they can't risk too much experimentation if Agatha spills too much blood. The best method for recovery is to rest for 2 days before resuming practice and production, but a diet of porridge and liver speeds up the process. Agatha is taken aback to hear this, as those are the exact words she once heard from Roland. Anna further mentions that since she's supposed to inherit Agatha's crafting methods, she will take charge of producing the next 2 sigils. Agatha smiles and hands over the responsibility to her. Later, Iris meets with Roland again, discussing the upcoming divine war against the devils. She's having a hard time digesting the sheer amount of information. She wants to know if the devils are really as strong as His Majesty claims. Roland confirms it without a doubt. They possess both immense strength and overwhelming numbers. To give her perspective, he reminds her that while his armies can easily defeat Timothy's knight squadrons, he isn't as confident when it comes to devils. After all, the devils have been hiding in the northwest of the Dawn continent for the past 400 years, and unlike the witches, they never had to start over. Most importantly, negotiation isn't an option in this war. It will only end when one side is completely exterminated. Iris questions if Roland intends to announce this information to the public. Roland admits that while it's inevitable, he won't disclose it yet. He has no way of knowing how people will react to the existence of such cruel and terrifying monsters, and building trust takes time. Iris agrees, understanding that panic can be more dangerous than any enemy. She has one last question. How long do they have until the next divine war? Roland explains that they have 5 years or less. No one knows exactly when the Red Moon will descend. All he can say is that war could break out at any time, so he can't unify Grey Castle at a slow pace. Since that's the case, Iris declares that she is willing to follow Roland's orders without hesitation. She formally states that the Candle family will adhere to His Majesty's laws without resistance, and Roland's decree will be the only voice that echoes through the northern region. She also hopes that his promises to establish steam engine factories in the north will materialize soon. Then, she proposes something drastic. She's willing to leave Carl behind so her father will have no choice but to agree. However, Roland believes that if she leaves her brother as a hostage, Duke Carlin will see it as a threat. Of course, Iris has already considered this as well. Later, as Roland sits alone lost in thought, he can't help but notice how radiant Iris is. Her ideas are progressive, and she's rather adaptable. If the entire northern region truly serves him as she promised, then his controlled territory will practically double in size. After all, nothing is sweeter than population and resources. With this, pressure will mount on the remaining aristocrats in the eastern region, and if all goes well, he may finish unification before the months of demons arrive. His thoughts are interrupted when Agatha enters his office, carrying a box full of sigils. She explains that they failed twice in the first batch, and Anna also participated. Agatha then reminds him that if she's going to continue making sigils, she requests an independent and spacious laboratory instead of a shack that's shabbier than a horse stable. We then shift our attention to these sigils. There are different types of sigils, each designed to mimic basic functions of a phone. The listening sigil provides long-distance communication. The screeching sigil emits a piercing scream when it detects magic energy, an effective prevention measure against enemy raids. As for the observing sigil, it will assist Thunder in his explorations. Speaking of Thunder, Roland mentions how he wasn't able to join the crew on their voyage, so he couldn't witness the incredible sea line. He's feeling bummed about it. The scene transitions to Thunder and his crew sailing through the sea. The fog is dense around them, so he instructs his crew to roll up the sails and move slowly while keeping their eyes and ears open. They're getting close to their destination. Margaret and Molly are also present on the boat. They are all here on the mission to find another witch, Joan. She's actually a mermaid. Margaret last saw her 10 years ago. Back then, Joan's legs transformed into a fishtail. However, a decade has passed, and Margaret doesn't know what Joan is like now. Camellia, another witch on board, hears Margaret's description and comments that this sounds like a summoning ability. It's not surprising that Joan can transform into an aquatic creature. If she's been living in the ocean all this time, then her awakening day wouldn't have been dangerous. She's likely been passively using her magic power to maintain her form. But Camellia isn't sure if they'll find Joan there after all these years. Thunder, however, is confident. His intel has never been wrong. Ever since he learned Joan was a witch, he has been watching this place. Her song is the symbol of Wavesnow Island, and some merchants even tried to take her voice for themselves. Camellia asks if Thunder ever tried stopping them. He responds that a sailing accident stopped them, and he promises that none of them will ever think of capturing her again. Suddenly, one of the men in the watchtower reports that he hears the song. Thunder immediately silences the crew. As the melodies fill the air, Thunder quickly orders the anchors dropped. He and a group of witches board a rowboat to meet her. Thunder is certain that she remains hidden out of fear of being caught. He explains that endangered ships typically only hear her song, and few have ever seen her in person. This is why he anchored the ship in order to draw her in while they approach her with the rowboat. Finally, they spot her, and Joan notices them in return. Margaret quickly introduces herself, but Joan, timid and overwhelmed, mumbles incomprehensibly. Thunder realizes that Joan may have forgotten how to speak. He turns to Camilla, who uses her magic to bridge their communication. Suddenly, Margaret is able to understand Joan's words. Margaret begins the conversation by expressing her gratitude for saving her back then, and she is once again to ask for Joan's help. Joan remembers Margaret well. They used to spend a great deal of time together. In order to make her comfortable, Margaret praises the incredible powers of witches. She points out that even their conversation is possible only because of Camilla, a fellow witch, who can connect hearts and minds. However, Joan remains wary of the sailors, as they have always sought to capture witches. Margaret assures her that the church has been eradicated. Witches have now settled in the bay, where Slumber Island has become a sanctuary, a town built by witches, for witches. Joan is free to join them. As the conversation continues, Thunder grows more curious about what they are talking about. Suddenly, Joan retreats into the water. Seeing this, Thunder immediately turns to Margaret, in order to question her how the conversation went. Margaret delivers the good news that Joan has agreed to her request. The scene transitions to Dawn Capital, where Yorko rides in a carriage alongside a refined woman. She asks his thoughts on the city. Yorko admits that Dawn Capital is indeed a city of merchants. Even the city ruler supports the free market. If this were Grey Castle, such unrestricted trade would be shut down by patrol guards. Perhaps only the Bay could compare. Miss Denise then reveals an interesting tidbit. The capital's goods fall into two categories: practical items such as glassware, mirrors, perfumes, and high-quality fabrics, and unique or peculiar items, which have no fixed price and are valued based on the buyer's preference. Every weekend, the city's auction house opens, with entrance requirements that vary depending on the items being sold. She offers to take Yorko to the most exclusive auctions if he is interested. However, she mentions that slave trading has taken over the two businesses she just mentioned. Yorko remarks that slave trading is nothing new, but Denise clarifies that this is an expansion of an already existing industry. The easiest businesses are always the most popular. Since the church's invasion of Wolfheart, hundreds of thousands of refugees have fled. If one feeds and shelters them, they can be gathered and sold for profit. Though she personally dislikes the idea of trading people, especially women, Yorko reassures her not to dwell on it if it upsets her. The most profitable ventures often carry great risks. Just take those refugees as an example. If those refugees revolt, the slave traders will have much to fear. The carriage driver announces their arrival at the royal district. Yorko parts ways with Denise, relieved to be free of her company. She is a married woman, and if her husband had seen them together, Yorko fears the consequences. His assigned guard, Fox, approaches, inquiring about his conversation with the lady inside the carriage. Yorko brushes him off, claiming they only discussed business. Fox was personally assigned to Yorko by Roland, and it is clear that Yorko does not like him in the least. Regardless, Fox inquires what is the next step. Yorko declares that he will raise the Grey Castle flag and announce to the entire kingdom that the Grey Castle ambassador has arrived. Later, Yorko finds himself at a lavish banquet, one of the grandest he has ever attended. He notices several young ladies who seem ready to entertain. It is then that Prince Manhwa, the first Prince of Dawn, arrives. He greets Yorko and shares good news. He has passed on Roland Wimbledon's letters and documents to his father. Yorko returns the greeting, offering his condolences for the king's illness. It is unfortunate that the king cannot meet him personally. About half a month ago, the king collapsed suddenly at a banquet. Since then, he has remained unconscious, waking for only 3 hours a day. Once pleasantries and formalities are exchanged, the prince moves to leave, but Yorko stops him. He wishes to discuss the alliance between Dawn and Grey Castle. Prince Appin acknowledges the matter, but states that he will wait for his father's recovery before handling administrative decisions. With that, Yorko resumes enjoying the banquet. There he encounters Miss Denise once again. Meanwhile, Prince Appin speaks privately with Otto, his close associate. If you don't recall, Otto is the same guy who was friends with Andrea. Otto does not understand why Appin is delaying the alliance treaty, especially since the king himself supports it. The church remains a serious threat. They cannot afford to sit idly by. Appin reminds Otto that they were originally meant to align with Timothy, not Roland. Otto argues that they should support the rightful king of Grey Castle. The ambassador's message confirms Roland's legitimacy. However, the prince silences him, assuring Otto that he will handle the matter and warning him not to interfere. Otto, unwilling to let the issue drop, insists that they must take action against the church. His persistence earns him a cold glare from the prince. Fear grips Otto. He quickly swallows his argument and promises to hold his tongue. In a chilling tone, Appin asks if they are still friends. Otto replies that they are. Not only him, but Belinda and Oro are also part of their friendship circle. Appin follows up with a heavy question. If something were to happen to the king, would Otto support him as the next ruler? Trapped by the weight of their friendship, Otto has no choice but to agree. Once alone, Otto feels deeply unsettled by the changes in Appin. When the king fell ill, Appin seemed devastated. However, he has recently regained his composure, but he is different now. Otto knows the prince well. Appin was never the type to seek power at any cost. He decides to seek out help from his friends, hoping they can uncover the truth behind Appin's transformation. Meeting Oro, who is training with his sword, Otto directly states his concern. Oro, however, is uninterested. Appin is the prince, the future king basically, and Oro is sure that he will never remain their friend forever. Besides, Appin is a grown man now. If he is throwing a tantrum, Oro sees no reason to entertain it. Otto reminds him of their long-standing friendship, but Oro snaps. Ever since Andrea's supposed death, their friendship was broken beyond repair. That is when Otto reveals the truth that Andrea is alive. Shocked, Oro demands immediate answers. Otto explains that he saw her in Border Town, under Roland Wimbledon's protection. She turned out to be a witch, and Roland shelters witches in Grey Castle. Her death was a ruse orchestrated by her father to protect her. Now more than ever, Otto believes they must pull Appin back. Dawn must ally with Roland to defeat the church. If they do not, and the church attacks alone, they may never see Andrea again. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Oro finally understands. The two friends clasp hands, ready to do whatever it takes in order to preserve their long-shared friendship. Later we meet Yorko, who finally makes it to his room, only to get spooked by Fox. Yorko demands to know what emergency made Fox sneak into his room just to scare the hell out of him. Fox reveals that Wolfheart refugees are pouring into Dawn, and it's a great opportunity to recruit people. He suggests that Yorko treat it as a business deal, focusing on buying craftsmen, those who are literate, and those with special skills. The money he spends will be reimbursed by Roland. What's more, for every person they recruit, His Majesty Roland will pay 5 silvers. But Yorko makes it clear that he has no head for business. When he chatted with Denise, it was only to get her to talk. He has no interest in running around and buying people. Besides, the slave trade mainly happens on the border between the two countries, and since he's supposed to be an ambassador, how is he supposed to explain going there? Fox reminds him that this is His Majesty's plan. Yorko doesn't have to leave Radiant City. Some slaves will inevitably be brought here to be sold. The price might be a little higher, but they can afford it, and the initial filtering will already be done. As for not having a head for business, Fox suggests he ask Miss Denise for help. She's a well-known noble merchant, and transporting refugees to Grey Castle wouldn't be difficult for her. Establishing a transport route would benefit them in the long run, and if they ever run into danger, they could just disguise themselves as small-time traders and retreat safely. Yorko is genuinely amazed at how much Fox seems to know about these affairs. Fox bluntly tells the pleasure seeker that while he was out mingling, Fox was out gathering information on the streets. By now, Yorko is forced to admit that while Fox is a capable knight, he's just as much a capable businessman. But the man makes it clear that he is neither a knight nor a businessman. However, he is willing to protect Yorko if the need arises. After all, Yorko's safety is something His Majesty Roland entrusted him with. As for his own identity, he's nothing more than a simple circus worker. The scene shifts to Neverwinter City, where poor Barov is drowning in a flood of requests from different departments, completely overwhelmed. But he's not alone in this mess. Beside him is Iris, sent by His Majesty Roland to learn a thing or two about how the city hall operates. She is already done with the first task Barov assigned to her, meticulously laying everything out with no room for mistakes. Internally, Barov is amazed by her mannerisms and intelligence. He's so impressed that he's literally eyeing her as a potential candidate for His Majesty Roland's wife. If Iris successfully establishes a provincial city hall in the north, that would be a great achievement. But if things keep progressing in the right direction and she excels in her role, Barov fears she might eventually replace him. To avoid this fate, he decides to teach her that city hall work isn't so easy to grasp. King Roland needs a minister who can see the bigger picture. So, he bombards her with an extremely complex problem and asks for her solution. In his mind, controlling the big picture requires experience in administration and a deep understanding of the city's unique traits. No amount of talent or prior experience could allow her to know this city like the back of her hand. But to his shock, she comes up with a solution that completely blows his mind. The plan she proposes is not only clever, but also so daring that even he wouldn't have thought of it. Later that night, Iris returns to her room, where she finds her brother, Carl, reading a book he bought from the local market. It's like a painting, but it has a story too, making it quite entertaining to read. Seeing her in such an upbeat mood, Carl wonders if she has no intention of returning. She reminds him that she's still waiting for their father's response. Once their father replies, Roland will let Carl return home, but she plans to stay longer. Carl asks if it's the city hall that wants her to remain. She clarifies that it's not the city hall itself, but Roland Wimbledon's administration. She then tells Carl that she will be sending a letter to their father soon enough. The scene transitions to the northern region, where Duke Carlin throws a tantrum after reading the letter Iris sent. The source of his distress is His Majesty Roland's plan to strip the aristocracy of their governing power. Usually Iris has always helped Carlin stay one step ahead, but this time, he feels like she has completely handed them over to Roland. To make matters worse, she even told him to avoid resistance and accept the situation. Her choice of words makes Carlin sound like a criminal. For a moment, he's certain she's trying to rebel against him. If he submits to Roland, the Candle family will lose its ruling power over the border region. Just when he thought he could enjoy total control after getting rid of the Holmes and Lista families, he's back to square one. At the same time, he dreads the consequences of refusing to submit to Roland. Iris had made it clear in her letter that if their father refused to submit, both she and Carl would be doomed. Roland would imprison them forever, just like the heir of Duke Ryan. She could already imagine countless ways he could humiliate her, and once he was done with her, he'd throw her into the dungeons or the military barracks, destroying the so-called Northern Pearl forever. To intimidate her father further, she urged him to think about his own fate as well. Before long, Roland's armies would descend upon the north, and she was willing to bet that his vassals and knights wouldn't last even half a day. If he resisted, he wouldn't just lose his title, he wouldn't even be able to live as a normal citizen, much less a duke. Basically, she was trying to convince her father by showing her own fear of the worst. She wanted him to send an official letter of loyalty to express their cooperation. Along with that, she asked him to send literate servants to learn the city hall's governing system so they could familiarize themselves with the new laws. Since Iris had already made her decision, Carlin saw no choice but to trust her plan and pledge his loyalty to His Majesty Roland. But as a duke, he still wanted to rely on his last trump card, offering Iris as the next queen. He would include this condition in his letter of loyalty. The scene transitions to Dragon's Cliff, where Iron Axe launches an attack with the First Army in formation. Their objective is to take down Spear Passy's worthless brother and reclaim her territory. Iron Axe asks her what she intends to do with the traitor knights and the servants who sided with her brother. Without hesitation, she makes it clear that they are no longer her knights if they chose to betray her, and she wants them to pay for it. He then asks her what she plans to do with Redwyn Passy, her brother. He reminds her that His Majesty's orders were to send all elite rebels to Neverwinter, except for her family. Everyone else who resists will be executed. However, she has the choice of what happens to her brother. For now, it seems like Spear Passy hasn't decided yet. The battle erupts, and after a brutal clash, she emerges victorious, reclaiming her land by utterly defeating her brother. When she finally stands face to face with him, the bastard still has the audacity to spew nonsense, calling her a witch, a devil's claw. Paranoid from his defeat, he throws every insult in the book at her, even going so far as to claim she's just an adopted child. But his words have no effect on Passy. In fact, she welcomes the idea. If she were adopted, that would be even better. She has no desire to be associated with a scum brother like him. She turns on her heel to leave, but not before ordering the knights to take Redwyn Passy to Neverwinter City. Since he's lost, he is just a lost cause. He's better suited for hard labor in the mines. With that, she walks away. As she moves through the corridor, She takes in the ruins of her town and silently wishes for Dragon's Cliff to prosper under Roland's rule. The scene shifts to Neverwinter, where the skies rumble with thunder, a clear sign that summer is here. The weather seems unforgiving. Roland is relieved that it didn't rain 3 days ago. Otherwise, one of his plays, The City of Love, wouldn't have had its outdoor performance. Fortunately, the remodeled plaza was spacious enough, and Echo's ability had taken the performance to the next level. Even Roland, despite having watched many high-production films in the past, was deeply moved by the performance. He had no doubt that the song she sang, the Song of Unison, had a profound effect on everyone who heard it. Suddenly, Barov bursts into Roland's office with good news for once. It's a rare sight. Usually, every time he steps into the office, he's already out of breath and rattling off the worst possible scenarios. Barov reveals that the latest real estate statistics have been calculated, and the results are just as Roland expected. After the performance of The City of Love, the number of people submitting requests for rentals and home purchases has surged. Even marriage registrations have increased significantly. Roland feels proud upon hearing this. He further emphasizes that the theater is not just for entertainment, it serves as a tool for emotional stability. Beyond promoting the pride of labor and construction, it also strengthens social bonds. His next plan is to expand efforts to accept more refugees. A thriving population is Neverwinter's greatest resource for development, and it takes priority over many other matters. He then instructs Barov to summon Scroll, as he has something important to discuss with her. Soon enough, Scroll arrives in his office, responding to the summons. Roland wastes no time getting to the point. He intends to expand the education department's reach and include the newly arrived refugees in the system. However, Scroll is hesitant. At the moment, they lack enough teachers and classrooms. To accommodate the new influx, they would need to double or even triple their current staff. But Roland already has a plan to ease the burden on teachers by having students teach themselves. His idea is simple. Public classes will be held once a week for basic literacy, and the rest of the time, students will practice writing and recognizing words using workbooks. There will be no grades, tests, or formal requirements. Everything will depend on the individual's willingness to learn. Scroll, however, is skeptical. Without supervision, she doubts that even 1 in 10 students will succeed in learning properly. But Roland doesn't mind. His goal is simply to give them a chance. There will always be people dissatisfied with low salaries, and to prevent them from making poor decisions, he feels it is his duty to provide them with a way to improve themselves. Offering a legitimate path for the lower classes to rise is essential to maintaining the energy of a new government. Outside, the rain has finally stopped after pouring all night. A new day begins. Wendy attempts to wake Nightingale, but she remains in a deep slumber, oblivious to Wendy's calls. Deciding not to disturb her further, Wendy heads off to breakfast. After eating, she meets with her little students. She inquires about the sales of the first volume of Witch Diaries. One of the girls eagerly reports that the book has been a hit. Everyone is fascinated by the stories of Border Town's angels, especially the First Army soldiers. People come to buy copies every day. In the past week alone, they have sold around 60 copies. At this rate, they'll sell out all 1,000 initial copies within half a month. Wendy is pleasantly surprised by these numbers. While they may seem modest on paper, they are impressive for a town where food is the top priority. Witch Diaries is purely for entertainment. It doesn't help with studies, nor does it feed people. And it's not cheap either. It's time for them to start brainstorming ideas for the next volume. Luckily, Roland has already chosen the protagonist for the second book, Sister Echo. The title will be The Silver Moon Princess from the Southern Lands of Sand and Fire. Wendy finds herself looking forward to the day Roland conquers the southern region and finally visits Echo's homeland, an endless desert. Her role is to spread awareness about witches and reveal their true nature to the people. Echo, on the other hand, has firmly established herself in the theater, where the actors absolutely love her music. Meanwhile, Evelyn has opened a pub near the Holy Mountain Hotel, selling all sorts of unique liquors. Her drinks have become unforgettable to both locals and tourists alike. Rumor has it that Hummingbird will soon join City Hall as the Vice Department head of the construction department, making her the second witch to hold an official position after Scroll. As everyone works hard to build Neverwinter City, public perception of witches is also beginning to change. One day, they will be seen as equals. The scene shifts to the Kingdom of Dawn. Oro and Otto sneak around the king's residence, moving carefully through the shadows. Otto is anxious, fearing they might get caught. Sneaking into His Majesty's residence is strictly forbidden. But Oro insists this is necessary if they are to accomplish their goal. In fact, Oro still can't believe he used Andrea's whereabouts as leverage to demand help from Lord Quinn, her father. They burn through a sewer cap using acid and proceed inside. This passage is actually an old escape tunnel. Otto knows it like the back of his hand. He and Oro used to explore the castle through it during their childhood. Eventually, they reach the end of the tunnel, which leads directly to the fireplace in the king's chamber. Inside, they find His Majesty lying in bed. Appin is also present. Soon enough, 2 pure witches enter the room, joining Appin. If anyone had forgotten, the blonde one is Isabella, while the veiled woman is literally named Viel. They claim to have the medicine that can cure the king, but they refuse to hand it over unless Appin fulfills their unreasonable demands. And even if he manages to get the medicine, there's one condition. It will only work if the Pope is the one to administer it. The mention of the Pope catches Oro off guard, leaving him sweating bullets. From what Oro and Otto understand, these women are not alchemists sent to cure the king. They are pure witches, exactly like the ones Roland had warned them about. Veal reminds Appin of the orders he had received a month ago to shut down all roads leading to Wolfheart. Yet, for some reason, refugees are still pouring into the kingdom. She coldly points out that even if these people crawled their way to the border, they should have reached it by now. Appin tries to explain that there are simply too many of them. If they are stopped at the border, most of them will starve to death. There are no nearby cities or settlements capable of providing food, and if the refugees are forced to turn back, it will take at least a week to return to Moortown. By then, many will perish. But Veal remains indifferent. As far as she is concerned, if these people are abandoning their kingdom, they deserve to die, whether by starvation or dehydration. She would rather Appin focus on saving his father's life instead of worrying about breaking their agreement. With no other options, Appin reluctantly agrees to shut down all roads within the next week. However, if refugees manage to cross through the mountains or forests, he won't take responsibility for them. Isabella, at least, agrees not to force him to do something beyond his control. Satisfied, Veal picks up the medicine bottle, drinks it herself, and then pours it into the king's mouth through her own. With that, Isabella promises that he will wake up in an hour, like usual. Veal once again reminds him that as long as Appin follows orders, King of Dawn will be healed, and even healthier than before. Isabella also mentions that the next time they come will be when he completely shuts down the border, so she hopes he won't disappoint the Pope. The poor guy is totally frustrated, cornered by these filthy women. From what he understands, he's sure they're witches, which is why they fed the medicine through their mouths, in order to fuse it with magic. He finds it hard to believe that the church has witches, and what's worse is that whatever the church is doing is no different from demons. In the next moment, he signals his knights, and they pour into the area, completely surrounding them. Veal just calls this attempt utterly futile, saying the prince seems to take the church too lightly. But the prince, on the other hand, feels smug. They have stones of divine judgment all around the castle and everything. To the prince's despair, however, his soldiers unalive themselves. Oro decides to butt in, but Otto stops him. They can't get inside. The mechanism can only be triggered from within. Veal steps toward Appin, who slumps to the ground, recoiling in fear. The witches, on the other hand, seem disappointed that he still doesn't know how to follow orders. Still, they assure him that his father will be fine, and the Kingdom of Dawn will continue to exist for a while longer. Once the church takes Grey Castle, she plans to take Appin under her wing. While they will eventually take the Kingdom of Dawn, they promise to let Appin enjoy the luxurious lifestyle he craves. The citizens of Dawn will also be spared from the horrors of war. As they leave, they tell him to clean up the room as his father might be terrified to see this horrific sight. Otto and Oro finally take a moment to breathe. This encounter has taught them that witches aren't affected by the stones of divine punishment, and the church is planning to take Grey Castle and then Dawn, treating the four kingdoms like a feast, just as His Majesty Roland had described. Otto decides to reveal everything they saw to their fathers, as well as Lord Quinn, but Oro is against it. They just saw firsthand that the stones of divine judgment are useless against pure witches, meaning their families would be in danger. Otto, however, is confident that His Majesty Roland will help them. All they have to do is find the Grey Castle ambassador and relay the message. We then transition to Bordertown, where Prince Roland chuckles as he reads Duke Carlin's loyalty letter. One page is dedicated to pledging loyalty to Roland, but the 10 or so following pages are all praise for Iris, her beauty, her talents. He's basically describing her as the best woman for the position of queen. Essentially, this letter is more or less a marriage request. Roland just chuckles at the sight as he doesn't need a political marriage to secure his throne. Then he receives a pigeon carrying a letter. Once he opens it, he realizes it's from Ambassador Yorko of the Kingdom of Dawn. And what he reads is quite shocking. The Dawn Castle has been infiltrated by pure witches, and these pure witches are immune from the stones of divine judgment. The first prince, Appin, tried to resist, and his soldiers ended up committing suicide under the witches' control. The church's goal is to hold Dawn in place while they attack Grey Castle first. Oro Takata and Otto Lux witnessed Prince Appin's failed attempt against those pure witches, and now their families are seeking Roland's assistance. A profound change occurs in Roland's mood after hearing the news. The idea of witches being immune to the stones of divine judgment sounds terrifying. Nightingale reminds him that only transcendent witches with strengthened bodies or high-tier devils like magic slayers have that kind of resistance. Roland, on the other hand, decides that he's going to adjust his plans for conquering the southern region. Later, we see him in a conference with all the core members, planning how to proceed with the conquest. Iron Axe brings up replacing the First Army soldiers stationed at Dragon's Cliff with newer recruits. The aristocrats shouldn't be too much trouble, while the First Army should focus on taking on the church's forces. Roland agrees with this approach, but he has two major concerns. First, they don't know when the enemy will attack. Second, they don't know where it will happen. The church used to have only one path to attack Grey Castle, from the northern region all the way down to the capital. But now that they have the Dawn King in their grasp, the Divine Punishment Army might attack from the Dawn border as well. so he asks if anyone has any suggestions. Barov argues that no matter where they come from, they'll have to pass through the northern region first, which is Duke Carlin's territory. So he suggests having Miss Iris relay this information to her father and station herself in the north to watch for enemies. Iris agrees that keeping watch is important, but she points out that it's not an efficient plan. If the enemy is already at their doorstep, it would be difficult to buy more time. Roland then asks if she has a better solution, to which she suggests sending people to Hermes. This idea leaves a few people in the room stunned. Sending spies to the church's holy city sounds ridiculous. Even if they made it inside, it's not like the Pope would announce their invasion. The place is filled with church followers, making infiltration nearly impossible. But Iris reminds them that they don't need to enter the holy city. All they need to do is negotiate with the merchants near it. She then directs everyone's attention to the map and points out Hermes' unique geography. She highlights a particular slope by the mountains. The old holy city was below, while the new one was built on the plains above. The environment there is incredibly harsh. While it's harder for demons to attack, the living conditions are terrible, making farming impossible. That means Hermes must source food from elsewhere. Every fall, dozens of caravans arrive from all 4 kingdoms to provide resources, turning the old holy city into a marketplace, almost like a small town. The church maintains order there, and merchants frequently pass through. In other words, if the church starts sending large armies of divine punishment soldiers, the merchants will know immediately. While the room is rocked by Iris's quick thinking, Knight Carter is shocked by her intelligence. Roland also approves of her plan, and now he understands why she's called the Northern Pearl. Iris then turns to Roland and expresses her desire to see his army in action. She has always been intrigued by how he managed to siege the capital in just one day. If she can understand the First Army's combat style, she might be of use in the coming conflicts. Meanwhile, Sylvie believes they should contact Miss Tilly, as the witches of Sleeping Island might also be able to help. Roland is reluctant to rely on Tilly's aid, knowing that Sleeping Island is already dealing with internal conflicts. However, Sylvie is right. If they want the best chance at defeating the mysterious pure witches, they need the help of other witches. So, he decides to write her a letter. Agatha also reminds him not to forget to equip all mortals with stones of divine judgment. During the time of the Alliance, there were witches with incredible power, and mortals without stones were completely helpless against them. But Barov raises a concern. Where will they get enough stones in such a short time? That's when Roland reveals his plan. He intends to take the stones from the church itself. Instead of waiting for the enemy to strike, he plans to locate them first, like snapping the fangs off a venomous snake. Later, we see Wendy gathering the other witches to break the news. The church is coming. For a moment, a heavy gloom settles over the room. But one by one, the witches promise to do their part to contribute to the war. Moon vows to generate as much electricity as she can, while Evelyn promises to produce as much liquor as possible. Wendy can see that everyone is anxious about the looming war ahead, but no one seems to be backing down. Their belief probably stems from the fact that His Majesty has never lost a single battle. This war is critical for the Witch Union's future. Wendy is certain that if His Majesty obliterates the church, the entire kingdom, or even the whole continent, will finally be safe for witches to live in. And in Roland's territory, they will create a new world where witches and commoners share equal status and honor. For now, Wendy insists that everyone keeps working as usual, just as Roland has always taught them. With courage in her heart, Wendy is sure that no one can defeat them. This is their home, and this is the turning point in changing the fate of witches. And so, all of the witches stack their hands together, vowing to overcome any hurdles in their way. Later, Wendy meets Nightingale, who seems unusually tense about the upcoming war. Nightingale has waited a long time for this moment, to finally face the church head-on. The sisters they lost to the church's hands have also been waiting for this day. As always, Wendy comforts her friend, pulling her into a passionate hug that melts the worries right off Nightingale's face. Meanwhile, the grain seized by the First Army from Dragon's Cliff quickly replenishes Neverwinter's inventories, ensuring enough rations for the upcoming war. The new recruits will soon finish their basic training, and raiding the church for stones shouldn't be too difficult. Roland is confident that 1,500 soldiers will be more than enough for the operation. However, he knows they're likely to encounter pure witches during this mission. That's why the contributions of Evie and Sylvie will be absolutely critical. Captain Brian approaches Roland, still struggling to determine the best location for battle. He believes the First Army can only reach its full potential if they attack from the western region. The Navy would be able to provide solid backup, ensuring supply replenishments within a single day. This distance would also be a huge disadvantage for the church, as their forces would run out of food within a month. But Roland doesn't believe that Brian's plan will work. There are still many church followers in Grey Castle, and without any word from the Pope, they will continue to bring in as many supplies as they can carry. Iris also believes that the church possesses berserker pills, substances capable of transforming ordinary people into monstrous warriors. If the church starts losing, they might force the citizens of Grey Castle to consume these pills, turning them into weapons to weaken the First Army. The objective is the most important part of any battle, and if we don't achieve it, then even a victory becomes a loss. She argues that Roland needs every citizen in Grey Castle alive. They cannot allow the church to massacre the kingdom's people. Brian is startled by her words. As far as he understands, she is suggesting they launch an attack on the enemy before they even enter Grey Castle. He reminds her of the consequences. If their soldiers run out of ammunition, resupplying won't just take a day or two. Iris admits that she doesn't fully understand the artillery and firearms that Neverwinter uses, but she does know that no battle should come at the cost of innocent civilians. That's when Roland suggests focusing troops and supplies on the border cities first. This way, they can minimize transportation issues and avoid fighting within Grey Castle itself. But Captain Brian is still unsure. How will they know where the church will attack from? Roland proposes baiting them into attacking a specific location. If they can determine when the enemy will strike, they should be able to detect their preparations in nearby cities. The answer is Blizzard Cliff. If they pile up supplies there and station the First Army at Valley Town, which is nearby, the church will be drawn into attacking along that route. Brian asks why they would choose Blizzard Cliff. Iris explains that it's because Blizzard Cliff is too close to the Holy City. Instead of waiting for the church to attack, they should act as if they are preparing an offensive. This will pressure the enemy into falling back toward that position. But Brian questions what happens if the church refuses to take the bait and chooses another route instead. Roland's response is simple. Then the holy city of Hermes will be annihilated. The next scene takes us into Anna's twisted nightmare. She sees buildings burning, flames surging wildly, a result of her own witch powers. Then, she is slapped by her father across the face. Anna jolts awake, gasping. It looks like this is not the first time she's had this dream. Later, she meets Wendy and her little helpers. She proceeds to hand Wendy this month's salary, 2 golden royals. Later, she gives a single coin to Knight Carter, who, in turn, delivers it to Anna's father. The reason Carter is delivering the money is because Anna refuses to meet him. She knows exactly how he'll act, just as he always did. And if she sees him now, it will only create more trouble for Roland. She doesn't want to add to his burdens. Knight Carter later reports back to her after completing the task, and Anna expresses her gratitude. She also instructs him not to tell Roland about this. Later, we see Sister Molly and Honey exploring Bordertown together. They are absolutely fascinated by how much the town has changed in just one winter. After spending a wonderful time together, they can only wish for one thing, that Miss Tilly would come to Bordertown and live here with them. If that happened, they could all live here happily, forever. The armies are ready to sail, and everything is going according to plan. Once they secure enough stones of divine judgment, the leading squad will first head to the northern region. Eventually, all 4,500 troops will rendezvous at Valley Town, forcing the church to attack Blizzard Cliff. Iris assures Roland that she will write to her father, requesting that he provide half of the northern region's stored rations for the soldiers. She also promises that the ruler of Valley Town will fully cooperate with anything the First Army requires. Roland curiously inquires if she does not plan to return, to which she expresses her intentions to follow the First Army in all its subsequent battles. She entrusts her brother to Roland's care, and he promises to look after him. Grateful for his kindness, she assures him that when the time of battle arrives, she will be waiting in Valley Town. Once she departs, setting sail with the First Army, Nightingale appears beside Roland. He asks if everything the woman said was genuine. Nightingale confirms that there was nothing deceitful. Her loyalty and combat knowledge were at least truthful. With this reassurance, Roland returns to the castle. In his office, he studies the map, noting that the western region now has an oceanside dock. His next step is to contact the infrastructure department to construct buildings, storage spaces, and a temporary port. He also orders an increase in coke oven production. Suddenly, Maggie arrives carrying a letter from Princess Tilly. Whatever is written inside demands immediate attention. Without hesitation, Roland instructs Maggie to take Sylvie and chase after the departing ships, delivering Tilly's message to Evie. At sea, the First Army. On board the ships, Iron Axe and Brian strategize their next move. Brian suggests blasting the cannons upon reaching the port, but Iron Axe warns that this could provoke hostile attention from the local ruler. Their primary target is the church, and other matters should be secondary. He decides to proceed with diplomacy first, delivering the necessary documents and following protocol. Iris volunteers to go, explaining that the Candle family is one of the great families of the northern region, and her father is a duke, making her a suitable ambassador. Brian expresses concerns for her safety, while Iron Axe advises her to take a squadron of soldiers as a precaution. If they hear gunfire, they will launch an attack. Upon landing, Iris proceeds into the city, where Baron Delta, the ruler of Redwater City, arrives to escort the delegation. Later, Iron Axe meets with the Baron and states their objective. The church is attempting to consume all 4 kingdoms, and rebellion is now inevitable. He reminds the Baron of the disasters at Everwinter and Wolfheart. Their goal is simple: destroy the church and leave. However, the Baron acts suspiciously, insisting there is no need to rush. He invites them to a grand banquet at the castle that evening, hoping everyone will attend. While Iris expresses gratitude for his generosity, she reminds him that they must first fulfill His Majesty's orders. As the army continues its march, an ominous presence suddenly descends upon the area. Sensing danger, Iron Axe commands full mobilization. Just then, Maggie and Sylvie appear, warning them of an impending threat. Sylvie has detected magic in the area. At that moment, the Baron's knights suddenly turn on the first army. Chaos erupts as the Baron himself is struck by a massive rock, thrown by a witch with the power to hurl boulders. Iron Axe immediately gives the order to open fire. Soldiers unload their bullets, killing the witch on the spot. As she falls, the magic Sylvie had sensed dissipates. Brian reflects bitterly on how the church not only forces commoners into consuming berserker pills, but also secretly trains witches, ruining their lives. Nevertheless, Iron Axe reaffirms their mission. Following Roland's orders, they storm the church, eliminating the hooded figures inside. Inside the treasury, they uncover a hoard of valuable items. The scene shifts to Slumber Island, where Madame Heidi appears for the first time. It has been 2 months since Evie and Softfeather left, yet no news has arrived. She fears something terrible may have happened. She reflects on how her position on the island has become increasingly precarious. Ever since Tilly established the slumber spell, all non-combat witches have sided with her. Those useless individuals are now beginning to stand on equal footing with battle witches, a fact that frustrates Heidi. Just then, her subordinate Skyfire rushes in with urgent news. A new witch has arrived on the island. Her name is Annie. Skyfire fears that Annie is the same girl they encountered years ago, the one who had traveled with Evie. She recalls spotting Annie on a stretcher. She is certain that Annie is the same girl Bloodfang once rejected while taking Evie instead. Heidi gets furious and rebukes Skyfire for failing to take care of Annie when they first met. Skyfire insists she did her part and cannot explain how Annie has resurfaced. From what I can understand, Heidi secretly hands over support witches to the church, while keeping battle witches for herself. If Annie is alive and well, it could expose Heidi's dealings with the church. Heidi demands to know why Annie was brought in on a stretcher. Skyfire explains that Annie has a severe case of frost illness, and Deborah is already tending to her. Unsettled, Heidi orders Skyfire to summon Nightfall and instruct Sandstorm to investigate Annie's condition. Since Sandstorm has never met Annie before, she will not be recognized. Later, Sandstorm reports back, Annie is unconscious and the frost illness has spread to her lungs. She won't recover in just a day or two. However, rumors suggest that a witch in Grey Castle's western regions possesses the ability to cure any illness. Once the rainstorms subside, Annie is to be sent there. This infuriates Heidi. She turns to Nightfall and asks if she can ensure that Annie sleeps forever. Nightfall hesitates but confirms that it is possible. When she inquires why it is necessary, Heidi dismisses the question, simply stating that Annie is a traitor to Bloodfang. Under Heidi's menacing glare, Nightfall quickly agrees to follow through. Heidi instructs her to cast her magic now, and it should only trigger when Annie is aboard the mermaid ship. With that, they decide to carry out the plan. Later, she and her entourage approach Camilla, demanding to see the new witch. Camilla, however, reminds them that Annie has already been put to sleep and should not be disturbed. But Heidi keeps insisting, claiming that they know someone named Annie already. She fabricates a story, stating that Annie may have been separated from Bloodfang during an escape from an island. Left with little choice, Camilla grants them permission to see Annie. Once they finally get inside, Heidi tries to distract Camilla while Nightfall attempts to cast her spell in secret. However, Camilla sees through the trick immediately and stops Nightfall before she can complete the incantation. The spell Nightfall was about to use, the Seed of Eternal Rest, is a dangerous magic capable of putting someone into an unending sleep. Thanks to Camilla's intervention, the magic misfires and harmlessly dissipates into the ground. Realizing their plan has failed, Heidi quickly casts a spell of her own to obliterate Camilla. But to her shock, she only destroys a hologram, a mere projection of the real Camilla. At that moment, Skyfire unleashes a fiery attack to clear the path ahead and makes a break for it. But before their escape can be successful, they find Ash standing outside, blocking their way. Alongside her are several witches, including Andrea. The battle is swift. One by one, the Bloodfang members are subdued by Andrea and Ash. The next morning, Ash and Andrea report the capture of the Bloodfang group to Princess Tilly and await her decision. Tilly looks distraught to realize that everything Roland had warned her about in the letter turned out to be true. She can't help but feel sorrowful. Why must witches always be forced into conflict? According to Evie, most of the Bloodfang witches were unaware of Heidi's secret agenda. They had simply followed her without knowing the full extent of her schemes. After careful consideration, Tilly makes her decision. She will gather all the Bloodfang witches, including Heidi, and take them to the western region. There, they will face the Divine Punishment Army, the Judgment Army, and the Pure Witches. Tilly firmly believes that, just as Roland had said, if they can defeat the church once and for all, witches will finally enjoy true freedom. Even if Roland were not her brother, she would still stand by his side, for he has been helping her all along. Turning to Ash and Andrea, she asks if they are willing to accompany her on this mission. The answer is immediate. Both witches are more than ready to fight alongside her. Andrea, in particular, is already daydreaming about the ice cream and desserts she will indulge in once they reach Border Town. Well, boys, the long-awaited war is on the horizon, and I can't wait to cover all the details in the next episode.